Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 9th Board of Education meeting of the Hyde Park Central School District. In addition to the regular business meeting this evening, the board also has its annual organizational meeting, and therefore the district clerk opens the meeting until board officers are elected. So the meeting is now called to order. May I please have a motion to enter executive session to discuss confidential matters pertaining to the employment or future employment of a particular person or persons and potential litigation?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. We are now in executive session. Then we will begin. May I have a motion to close executive session, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So the next item on the agenda is the oath of office to our newly elected board members. I'd like to congratulate and welcome incumbent Daniel Duffy, returning member Kevin Sheehan, and newly elected member Gary McGrath. All of these board members have already taken the oath of office, and this will be noted in the board minutes. So at this time, we will elect the officers for the board for the 2013-14 school year. May I please have a motion to nominate someone for board president?
Can I ask a question? I thought we were going to have a discussion. Do we still going to do that or not?
Were we going to do that prior? I thought you meant during the motion, so,
It makes sense to discuss it before we nominate,
okay.
so if that's okay with everybody.
Sure.
So I'd like to say that I appreciate the support I got as president during last year's session, and that I am willing to continue to be president if that is the will of the board. I would like to make it known that professional pressures, I anticipate having less time to execute the position of president. However, I think that I can still manage it. However, if there's anyone else on the board who is interested, I would encourage them to step up and make their interest known, because I would also support that. My point is that I'm willing to do it, but if there's somebody else who is eager,
Is it that
please,
bad?
please step up. It's,
Everyone take one step back.
yeah.
All right, well, I would be willing to do it. I do have the time. I'm retired. There's no job pressures at all other than Meals on Wheels and the homeless shelter. Been here a number of years. I think I know what's going on. I think what Steve also found out was that be careful what you wish for, because it's not exactly what you thought it was going to be. Even that said, I'd like to give it a try if the rest of the board members would support that. And so I'll put my name in.
Okay, then I nominate Doug Heater for president.
You took care of that, didn't you? I'll
Yeah.
second that.
Anyone second the nomination?
I did.
Kevin.
Kevin, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Sorry.
Are there any other nominations? Board members have been provided with paper ballots to vote, which is part of the board's policy. If you could please mark them and pass them to me.
Here's mine.
I don't like being in this meeting. Only time I.
She wants no part of it.
Keep your hands out of your sleeves, please.
No, Glenn didn't show up.
Yeah.
Could have been stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm. Oh, I'm gonna change things.
Okay, so the results of the paper ballots are 1 vote for Mr. Heater from Daniel Duffy, 1 vote for Mr. Heater from Mr. Heater, 1 vote for Mr. Heater from Mr. McGrath, 1 vote for Mr. Heater from Mr. Sheehan, Mr. Sheldon, and Mr. Mittermeier. So congratulations, Mr. Heater. You are now declared the board president for the 2013-14 school year.
All right.
So if you would.
Can I first say
Yeah.
that a vote of confidence and appreciation to Steve for doing the job? And I know it's been tough at work with lots of things going on, and still being able to come to all the meetings and have your meetings with the superintendent, and it showed great dedication. I like your speech at graduation, by the way. So I think you did a job well done, and maybe when things slow down again, you can recycle back in, because I don't think people should stay as president for a long time anyway, so, but good job.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it.
So, Mr. Heater, would you please?
Is this just to get away from me?
Yeah. Well, how do you know I'm not gonna change the seating?
That's right, that's the one, like, the one
That's right.
power you have that's.
Steve.
You are a megalomaniac.
Reshuffle the table.
Celebratory lifesavers? Is
Yeah.
that what we're doing?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Oh, wait,
it's not
wait, wait.
chocolate, but it'll do in a
Yeah.
pinch.
Why does it look like he's moving to the back bench over there?
I'm closer to the
It's
door
like
now.
Parliament, back bencher.
I get to move? Gee. All right.
Not sure you're given the choice then.
You'll have to leave your extension cord, by the way.
Yeah, well, I'll do it. Put it over there.
Watch the water.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
Is there someplace over there I can plug in?
Put it down. This don't, this Steve's.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to figure out how to use a timer.
There's yellow ones,
My wife does.
too, for vice president.
First we do this.
Oh, first you gotta do that, yeah, okay.
Wait, this is Doug.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Doug, please.
Oh, am I on board now, or? Okay, all right, I didn't know if the other, all right, now we'll accept nominations for vice president. And I guess if there's any discussion, that can also go on.
Well, I've enjoyed being vice president, and I'm willing to do it again.
Mhm.
But I probably make it simple. I said, if interested, I think Mr. Heater should be the one to nominate me, otherwise I will decline.
Putting me on the spot.
Well,
Well,
you've expressed a
yeah,
position that's been consistent over the years, so.
well, you really put me on the spot, because my position is that it would be useful for the board if the vice president's job was a stepping stone to the president's job, so that they could get some experience instead of people coming in cold. On the other hand, Dan, you've done a great job as vice president, so you put me on the spot. I've made my intention known, but I will nominate you for vice president.
I'll second. I think that it's a good idea to have some consistency there, as well as the transition, so.
And next year I'll be 1 year closer to retirement.
But
Or
you
1
still
year
won't be
closer to the
Elizabeth, right?
presidency.
He's still younger than I am, though.
That's why his hair is grayer than mine.
All right, then if there's no other nominations, we'll have our vote. No.
We need to change the bylaws. Am I writing too slow?
Okay, so the results for the vote for vice president is Daniel Duffy for Dan Duffy, Mr. Heater, Mr. McGrath, Mr. Mittermeier, Mr. Sheehan, and Mr. Sheldon voted for Mr. Duffy. Congratulations, Mr. Duffy.
Thank you.
I'd like to have you take the oath of office, please. Come to you. You just can read that and then I'll just sign it.
Did you do it yet?
No.
Oh,
Yeah, you read it, but you didn't read it out loud.
You want me to do this president first? Because we didn't do that for me.
Yeah, just,
Okay.
you blow that question, we're gonna fire you.
Stand up.
can you sign it?
I, Douglas Heater, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of President of the Hyde Park Central School District Board of Education for 2013-2014 school year.
Whoops. I, Dan Duffy, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of Vice President of the Hyde Park Central School District Board of Education for the 2013-2014 school year.
Just sign right there, please. Thank you.
Could I just make one comment first here also? I know within it. I intend to swap the clerk and the vice president so that it's more balanced, 3 and 3, for the next meeting, so that it doesn't look like there's 2 outlaws on that side and 4 people on this side. I'd like to have it balanced. Something I always said I would do if I got to be president, and that's one thing I am going to do. I'd also like to have Mr. McGrath between 2, I guess that's not going to work, is it? Well, since you're new, I'm not worried about Kevin, because he's been here, he's been a president, he's been everything. But it would be nice for you to have somebody always, in case, like Glenn's not here right now, that you can ask a question of, on the side. So I would switch Glenn and Gary also, just to make it, so that you always, Kevin's a great source of information. So that's, just so you're not surprised to the next board meeting, the places will be changing. All right?
That is the one prerogative of the president. There's not many, and that's one of them.
Everything else requires a vote.
Yeah, so. I guess that'd be careful what you wish for, because, okay, we're now, as far as I know, there's no agenda modifications?
No.
No. So then, I have a motion to adopt the agenda for this July 9th, 2013 Board of Education meeting.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carried. I have a motion for the consent agenda, which includes a long, long list of items.
Goes to page
Is there any that
13.
warrant explanation? I don't think so.
Do you have the motion yet? I'm sorry.
No, I haven't got a motion yet.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just,
So moved.
Second.
is there any discussion?
I'd like to make a comment, please.
Sure.
As part of the consent agenda, you're approving the audit committee members, and we will need to reach out for committee members, community members for the audit committee.
That is correct, because,
Yeah, we're down to one now because I'm on the board.
Right.
And the one that's here would really, he'd be more than thrilled if somebody else stepped forward. Like us board members, we'd be more than happy if somebody stepped forward and took our spot. So we
True.
have to kind of beat the bushes, I think, and try to see if we can attract some worthy candidates as community members to the audit committee. Because I don't want to lose the traction we've gotten with that committee. So,
well, one of us is going to have to not be on it. We can't have four.
right, well, but we're just talking about, this is just appointing the community member, Aaron, and he's indicated that if we drummed up one or two more, he'd be willing to go, you know,
Oh.
he'd be happy to, he's done a great job, but,
Yeah.
you know, everyone has commitments, and so,
I
um,
hope he stays because he
Yeah.
has the experience
yeah, yeah.
as an auditor, so it's
Right.
kind of helpful. All right.
We've had some really
Just
good
one
community
question. Was there any changes to the consent agenda? Any last-minute changes? No, okay.
One additional point that I'd like to make concerning the consent agenda is that part of that is to adopt the meeting dates. The current calendar, as included on the agenda, does not have meeting locations for several of the meetings. Can I assume that we'll circle back and discuss that at a later date?
On this agenda.
Okay.
Okay. All right, then. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Motion carried. So that brings us down to 8. Is that quite, or?
Yes.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
We have to do these all individually.
Mhm.
All right. Can I have a 8.1, approve meal prices?
So moved.
Second?
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, it's just, I'm sorry, I probably should have researched a little bit, but it just, if somebody can quickly tell me, so, any difference from last year?
Nope, they're exactly the same
Oh,
as last year.
that's easy then, okay. Not that it mattered, I just was curious, okay,
Right.
okay.
It's a lot more than when, last time you were here. Yes,
Yeah.
I know that.
I think it was like 45 cents when I was in elementary school and 80 in the high school, if I remember correctly.
All right, all those in favor? Motion carried. I have a motion for the borrowing resolution as listed in the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
I
And
think
this
this one we have to do a roll call.
Right. Mr. Duffy?
Aye.
Mr. McGrath?
Aye.
Mr. Heater?
Aye.
Mr. Mittemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Sheehan?
Aye,
Mr. Sheldon?
Aye.
And Mr. Watson's absent. Okay, motion carries.
All right, can I have a motion for 8.3, approve terms and conditions of employment? You noted that is the terms and conditions of employment for the assistant superintendent.
So moved.
Second?
Also the confidential managerial.
Also the confidential management staff. So we have a motion and second. All those in favor? Or is there any discussion first? All those in favor? All right, 8.4. We have a motion to designate a board member to serve on the Academic Strategic Planning Committee. And this is something that I did last year and I want to do again. Because I'm probably the only one that can spend all day, a full day in the district. So I will volunteer for that. So we don't have to, these don't require votes, do they?
Yeah,
We need a motion.
we have a motion, right, but we didn't assign a name to it. Did we get a motion yet, or you said, I don't know if we did.
Well, I was asking
We didn't
if,
get a motion, did we?
if there isn't,
I move that we designate Mr.
There
Heater
you
to
go.
be to serve on the Academic Strategic Planning Committee.
Second.
any discussion? All those in favor? Now
I
we come
move-
to the Audit Committee. This is where we have a problem.
Right, I'll move that, and then we can talk about who.
So, I would suggest, Kevin, that you stay on and I'll drop off unless somebody else wants to drop off.
I'd like to stay.
I'd like to stay.
Yeah, I know you.
Yeah, I would like to drop off.
Oh, and then I'll stay on.
Okay, so it's,
All right, can we have a motion?
I move that myself, Mr. Duffy, and Mr. Heater be appointed to the Audit Subcommittee as board
Second.
members.
Any discussion? All those in favor? I have a, now we're at the Comprehensive Health Advisory Subcommittee that both Mr. Lebrand and Ms. Mattias were appointed to last year, so we need somebody to step up for that. First of all, is anybody interested in that?
Can we hear a description of that work?
They meet monthly. Aviva's not here. That's Aviva's committee. Sharon, what's that? Sharon can fill in, but they meet monthly.
It's not even, it's quarterly.
Quarterly. And it's,
It'll be for 6 days, but it's usually a Wednesday at like 3:30.
And what are the topics? It's primarily,
Well, it's whatever's kind of current in terms of wellness, any policies to do with wellness. They usually try to have nurses, health teachers, gym teachers.
not so much on the instructional side, but on just in general
Yeah,
wellness.
just current
Right.
issues in health and wellness, how it goes, things like that.
food services.
Okay.
Was any interest, or we can move on, leave that open for the time being, or?
Well, I guess
Oh.
I'll jump in there. Sooner or later, I'll
Nope.
get in there.
Nobody's given it to Glenn yet.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's, yeah, don't
Couple
forget.
got him
You gotta
now.
pencil him in a few places.
We're not letting him off a couple
Yeah.
times.
Oh, no, it's tradition.
So we have a motion then, or not yet?
Not yet. So, Mr. McGrath will.
So I move that we designate Mr. McGrath to serve on the Comprehensive Health Advisory Subcommittee.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
We'll support you, Gary.
Now we going with the Energy Education Advisory Subcommittee. Currently, Mr. Mittermeier,
Excuse me,
Mr.
you
Sheldon.
Skip the
Skip
school
one.
boards.
Oh, I skipped the.
yeah,
I'm
8.7.
sorry. Oh, that's because I know Perry wants to do that again. He loved that job.
Actually, I am willing to continue.
Oh, that's good. I move we appoint Mr. Sheldon to the Dutchess County School Boards Association Executive
Second that.
Committee.
Wait a second.
Second.
Yeah. Any discussion? All those in favor? I knew you'd do it again. Once you're in there, you can't get,
You can't ever get away.
yeah.
It's actually
They're
a
still
pretty good
looking for you,
committee.
Doug.
It's a good committee, though. and,
I
you know,
enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's been,
yeah.
we've got a few active things
Yep.
going on.
All right, we're to the Energy Education Advisory Subcommittee. Current members for last year were Mr. Mittermeier, Mr. Sheldon, and Mr. Watson.
I have a question there. Last year, I don't think that we called it an energy education advisory subcommittee, I believe was it?
Well, I think,
I thought it was just an energy subcommittee.
I think so, too.
But at that time, we didn't have a contract dealing with any energy education.
right,
Well,
you
I-
might have added the
But that's
education.
only one element.
Right, so
Yeah,
just for clarification, I think that should
Okay.
be an energy subcommittee, not energy education.
That's fine with me. Any objections? All right.
And
it is
I would-
now the energy subcommittee.
Yeah, I would certainly want Mr. Watson there. I think he's a strong contributor to that
Yep.
committee. Due to my anticipation of greater professional commitments, I'm going to step back from this.
Okay.
I am willing to continue on it unless somebody feels strongly that
Well, we have room for
yep.
2 more, so.
One.
I have an interest
One.
in it.
I would assume, yeah, that you would,
One more.
given your background, you'd want that.
Well,
All
Mr.,
So-
what I mean is Mr. Watson and 2 others.
Oh, okay.
So can I have a motion?
I move that we appoint Mr. Watson, Mr. Sheldon, Mr. McGrath to the Energy Subcommittee, not energy, but subcommittee. Is it advisory
It's an
subcommittee?
advisory
We just
committee.
chopped the education out of it. Energy Advisory Subcommittee.
You have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
By the way, I think that we need to circle back and appoint community members to that at some point as well. That's why it's an advisory committee.
Yes, but we have to advertise out for that, wouldn't it?
Sure.
Would that be true?
Sure.
Okay, we're to F&O Steering Committee. Our Facility Steering Committee currently, let's see, Mr. Leran was on it, Mr. Sheldon and Mr. Watson. So, Perry's,
I am willing to continue on that.
yeah, Glenn doesn't get a choice. And anybody else?
Where the heck is that office?
Going once, going
Yes,
twice?
I'd be interested in
Okay,
Oh, here it is.
and Mr. McGrath. And I can have a motion to that effect then?
So moved.
I move that we designate to the Facility Steering Forum Mr. McGrath, Mr. Sheldon, and Mr. Watson.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? We're down to designate board members to serve on the government liaison.
Okay, I got a real good suggestion for that one.
Get rid of it.
No.
No. Okay.
But good thought, because where this is gonna go, you're gonna wish I had gotten rid of it. Now, I think you should be, and if maybe a second, maybe Dan, you both have probably a little bit more time than a lot of us, and some of that, put this delicately, visiting you have to do sometimes with some state representatives, et cetera.
That's
Does
fine.
require time during the day, and it's important work. And since you guys are in the leadership position of the board, you can kind of carry the message to Albany, et cetera.
Okay.
You know, I think you'd make a great partner with Dr. Fisher, and I just think that's I think that's a good thing to do. Just my opinion.
All right, it makes sense.
Yeah, so if you're
I
okay
have the
with it,
time.
but, yeah.
I don't know about Dan, but
I can schedule a time, but I have to have at least a week and a half in advance
Yeah.
notice. of
So, but at
schedule.
least, if there's at least one of you, at least there's somebody, but sometimes you gotta double team them, you know? The more the
And-
merrier.
I'll hit
so.
them low.
And sometimes what it can be too, Dan, that is that a lot of the advocacy work is a letter writing campaign, and typically NISBA will provide a sample letter. So there are times when it's critical that the legislators hear from us within 2 days, and we can't convene the board, but if we have the political liaison, then, you know, collectively, Doug and Dan can make a decision to say, yes, on behalf of the board, we'll send this letter in as an advocacy.
Yeah, and sometimes these guys have meetings, or there's lobbying
Yep.
days in Albany. There's
There's a
lots of
lot.
opportunities that, you know, it
Okay.
just may make sense, you know?
Yep.
So I think it's good to have the leadership do it.
I just have to make sure I don't send letters on both sides of the issue.
So therefore, I make a motion to nominate Mr. Heater and Mr. Duffy as governmental liaisons.
it. Just like,
Second?
any discussion? All those in favor? We need to designate board members serve on the Personnel Subcommittee. This past year, Mr. Duffy, myself, and Mr. Watson.
I would be interested in that.
And I'm willing to step down on this one.
Anybody else? I mean, I'll stay on it unless somebody else wants to be on it. So it's
don't jump out at
Mr.
once.
Sheehan, myself, and Mr. Watson, who doesn't get a vote.
I move that Mr. Sheehan, Mr. Watson, and Mr. Duffy be,
Peter, it's not Duffy.
Not him.
Mr. Heater, I'm sorry,
The other gray-haired guy.
be designated to
The older gray-haired guy.
Personnel Subcommittee.
Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Now we have the Policy Subcommittee. That was myself and Mr. Lebrand. I will continue doing that since we're almost done.
So that's, yeah, that's really important work. Tell me a little bit about that. How often are the meetings? What have you been doing lately? And what time
Well,
are
we
they?
had quite a few meetings. Some got canceled, but we tried for 2 a month to get. The problem is the prep work that you need to do with administrators and the other people
Yeah.
to get them in and to discuss it. You got to have somewhat of a gap, but if you only do once a month, then you can't get enough done.
Right.
So generally, we did 2 a month or as needed. And sometimes if something came up and they got canceled, then, oh well, you know. So, but we did accomplish a great deal in this past year, and there's just a lot of cleanup to do
Yeah.
to finish, so you're obviously interested.
Well, I was, but I think I'm a little concerned about the time commitment, so, yeah, so I gotta think about it, because I have, other commitments professionally and other community commitments too, so, and I start tacking on a whole lot of meetings, it's gonna be, so.
The other thing is, because of the situation last year, we met early in the afternoon.
Yeah, that's just not,
yeah, I don't
that's not
think
gonna
so.
work for me.
Well, let's appoint myself, and we'll try and convince somebody over the
A
next,
little arm twisting.
yeah.
I move that we appoint Mr. Heater to the Policy Subcommittee.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Yeah, the only other thing, while we vote yes, because that's okay, I'm not gonna change my mind, but, I think probably, that does seem like the kind of subcommittee that you can probably do a lot through email too, just because
Yes.
of the documents
Yeah.
are getting tuned up, and then you're back and forth, and so, maybe down the road, if you wanna get other members interested, you might have to think about a different way of handling how that committee functions. It's just really hard to
Okay.
do stuff during the day, we all know
Well,
it, so.
as I said at the last
Yeah.
meeting,
Right,
it was good having both Tim and I,
Right.
because we have different outlooks on
Right,
things.
right.
And things I would have put down and said, that's fine, Tim said, no, you can't do that. And then when he said, why? And I said, oh, you're right.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
so
not a
it's-
good thing
right,
to have just one
right.
person.
Yeah. We
but-
probably, I would certainly consider it if we could do a lot of it through email and back and forth, I'll help you look at stuff, but I can't
All right,
commit to meetings.
to begin with, that's what we'll do.
Okay.
All right, and I'll just include you informally.
Yeah, that's
All
fine.
right.
That, I
Okay.
just can't, and if for some reason I can make a meeting, I'll be happy to show up, but.
All right, and we need to designate board members to serve on Special Education Subcommittee. This past year, Mr. Duffy and Ms. Mattias were appointed to serve. Dan, you still interested in staying on that? Is there anybody else that, we had a nice combo going there for a number of years with Sharon and Dan. But there again, it's better to have 2 than 1, right?
Oh, yeah.
Anybody else interested in, how often do you meet?
It was once every 2 months,
Once every 2 months?
and it was usually around 3:30 again.
Okay. Any takers here? Well, maybe by next meeting, I'll designate myself to appoint people for the subcommittees. we need people that, A, want to do it, but B, we need more than one person. So temporarily, let's have Mr. Duffy on that meeting with the idea that there will be another person. Somebody.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, we can appoint the person that's not here.
I think it's a time we're changing.
No, well, okay, I'll put it this way. Whoever misses the next meeting will be appointed. How's that? Second.
Well, you can appoint people all you want, but if it's,
Show up and do
if it
something.
happens during the
All right,
workday,
okay,
then
fine,
Well,
fine,
no,
fine, fine.
difficult to attend,
Right.
period.
Yeah, I do think that on some of these, yeah.
You have to have an
We're
interest.
going to explore change in time, too.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly aren't looking to make your workday longer either. There's probably some other ways to do some of this committee work, and, you know,
Oh,
sometimes
absolutely.
you have to meet, and.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Okay, we voted on that, right?
Did we?
no, we were still
No.
discussing.
No.
All right, we had a
We
motion.
still have a motion second, we're ready.
And a second, right. All in favor? We now get to the Technology Subcommittee. Last year, Mr. Duffy and Mr. Mitterar were officially on, and I met with them when I could. Are you both still interested?
I'd like to maintain that commitment.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much, I want to stay.
Assuming I don't get overbooked with meetings, I would like to attend those. So it's the three of us, and then I think in the next 2 years, we need to really move forward.
Yeah.
All right.
I move that we designate Mr. Duffy, Mr. Heater, and myself to the Technology Subcommittee.
And a second? All those in favor? Now, all these liaison ones.
Can I ask, just because obviously I wasn't here on the board the last couple of years, how have they been functioning?
Not at all, I don't
Okay.
think.
So, I mean, is this something we want to continue to do? Is it a feel-good thing, or is it actually effective? I mean, I don't, what does
Yeah,
everybody think about
the
it?
idea was to have somebody, each one of those units could contact directly if
Right.
they had a problem. Fortunately, if it's somebody within the unit that they're nervous to go to a board member without going through the supervisor or
Right.
whatever, and it eventually all breaks down and it doesn't work.
I guess what I would say is that I just have this feeling that whether you live in the district or not, if you're part of the community, meaning you work here, and you feel it's that important that you need to convey something to a board member, I'm not really sure that having somebody designated the CSEA or the HPTA, people are going to call who they either know or they're comfortable with. And that's going to happen. If they're not with anybody, they're going to kind of go random and say, well, you know, that looks like a safe bet. But you know what? We're 7 equal voices and votes on the board, and are supposed
True.
to carry the message back to our fellow board members and the
So,
administration.
Actually,
So,
we have a model from last year
yeah,
when the food service thing requested somebody go to the,
right.
go to the kitchens and whatnot, which I did.
Yeah,
So, even though I wasn't the representative, so.
right.
I'm perfectly fine if the board chooses to not have any of these. Or if you want to just have somebody with name only and.
Well, yeah, I mean, I
don't
feel,
wanna-
I always feel like we overload ourselves with committees, but that's the important work, and I'm not saying that employee relations is not, except that when it's really underutilized, you seem to have this list as long as your arm, is all these functions you have, and it never, and it almost seems like it's just, like I said, my experience has been people are gonna call who they're comfortable with. They get to know the board members, some of us have been around repeatedly. They might take a look at Gary, for example, and say, never seen him before, he's definitely the safe bet. People are going to go who they're comfortable with, and I
Let me go out on a limb and ask, Harry, do they have this equivalent in Red Hook?
I don't believe so.
did-
I've not seen it in the reorg meeting.
I've never seen it
Gary, do you know if they had that in Poughkeepsie?
I've never seen it in any
Well,
district.
All right.
In concept, it seems like a great thing. I mean,
All right.
and I'm not opposed to eliminating the positions. But on the same time, I'd be interested in knowing from those units if there's something that would be better from their standpoint. I mean, I've been one of those liaisons. It didn't do anything this year for it. You know, nobody ever contacted me. I never did any reach out. So the question is, you know, it's in concept, it's a great idea to have someone that perhaps would be, you know, easy to approach or have some regular communication with, perhaps. Would the unit, does the unit have an interest in having a liaison? Is it, you know, do they even know that there was one?
Yeah, I don't know, I guess I start to get old-fashioned with this too, where, you know, I start to really believe, you know, board's function is governance and is not, you know, I don't want to say meddling, but, because I know where this stuff came from, because I was there, and there was a lot of meddling, you know, it was a lot of, we're not getting a straight story from the administration, and, you know, so there was a lot of these meetings that were going on. I was just like, oh, enough already. I mean, you got legitimate concerns, and a lot of them came to me without those meetings anyway. Some were totally unfounded, some were legitimate. I had to have a sit down with somebody and say, you really got to kind of try to work on improving your relations with this group or this, you know, this type, or these employees, you know, but other than that, it's just, it just becomes, I don't want to see it become meddlesome,
Right,
you know what I
and
mean?
I also know that how it does function is that when the unit has an issue that they want to bring up to the Board of Education, they have never hesitated to come and, in many cases, very respectfully stand at the podium, and that is the vehicle.
Right.
And so, rather than create some sort of a vehicle that is not clearly defined, and I wasn't around when it was instituted, but I was very surprised to see it, and it hasn't been utilized in the full 3 years that I've been here, but
It really
we
wasn't
have
much
had
before
several
either, by the way.
opportunity.
Yeah.
We have had several times where the units have come to the board meeting and participated in the, through the vehicle that we have that's public.
Right.
And
So-
I think keeping it in the public is fine.
I move that we eliminate the liaison positions as described in 8.15 through 8.19.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Yeah, and you know what, the beauty of email is just that, too. I mean, we you know, certainly my last go-around on the board 6+ years ago, email was coming in hot and heavy, and it's even more so now, and so many more people have access to it.
Okay.
You know what, if somebody really reaches out to you, there's lots of ways to do it, and they will. And so I'm not that concerned about it. And that's my plea for those watching on Channel 22. You know, if there's something really bothering you, you know, you should know that you can call, but you should try to work through your, you know, the chain of command, so to speak, and I may refer you back to it. But if it's a serious issue, then obviously I will carry it forward. You know, I want to know about, you know, things that may be, you know, wrong, that are, I mean, when we talk about seriously wrong, not just that you don't like the way the grass is growing, but, you know, serious issues of that are of concern that really you think need to be addressed. You know, by all means, anybody, regardless of whether you work for the district or not, should feel that they can call and contact a board member. And I think, you know, but.
Okay. Well, we have a motion, and I think that as part of this deletion, we should send a note to each unit saying that we're not having these positions this year, and if that's a problem, respond by, you know, the start of the school year.
But I would, as part of that, encourage them that, you know, board members are always available by phone or by email. Doesn't mean we're chopping off it's just adding this extra layer that never really seemed to get utilized really over the last, well, 3 years that Dr. Fisher's been here, but even during the Carol Pickering era, it just wasn't, there was nothing going on with them. So I don't know why we just keep perpetuating this.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor? And now we're at the real meeting. Wow. So do we have any pride?
I'll start. We had a successful opening of our summer programs starting on July 1. We had our extended school year students arrive, and we have a new principal this year of our summer school. Things went smoothly with the usual transportation bumps, and but all the students that were expected to arrive and were healthy enough to arrive came in. What's nice is they're there for a full day. They are in air condition, and they got to get comfortable in their new setting and established. And then this Monday, and Cora was there to greet them as well, we welcomed the 150 Summer Bridge students. And summer school is very different than what maybe is the stigma of our generations. These children come off the bus smiling, and they're there with their friends, they're there with their peers, and it's definitely an academic and enriching and fun experience for them. So if anybody wants to get a dose of kids, we have plenty of them over at Ralph R. Smith, and it is always just nice to see kids throughout the summer. So we're very pleased to be able to offer these programs, both through what we fund locally, what we utilize our grant funding for, and for some of our students, what it is really required that they need to progress and succeed. So if you need a dose of kids, stop by.
All right, on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, well, I would like to do a couple of things here, and I know we have one former board member in our audience. I was not at the last board meeting, and I do want to very much personally say to Sharon Mattias, thank you so much for your presidency for my 3 years, presidency for 2 years, and board member for a year while I was here. And I was just telling this story the other day when I was hired. As many of you may recall, I had been on a self-induced sabbatical to complete my doctoral dissertation. So I was applying to districts. I had circled some districts that I was interested in, and I was being choosy. And certainly, as I filled out the application for Hyde Park, I was rooting for myself for this pretty heavily at that point, and didn't realize how emotionally attached to applying for this position I would become. And when Sharon made the phone call to offer me the job, since I didn't have a job, I was in the process of, doing my research for the next interview, which meant, I would download and print out all the documents, do all my homework. And when Sharon said, I'd like to offer you that job, I was within arm's length to the plug of my printer, and I unplugged the printer and didn't care what it messed up, because that was it. I was done. They offered me the position here. So Sharon, thank you so much for that phone call and for all the support you gave me and Steve in the past year, and even in the whole 3 years. Thank you very much for what you've done, and all the board members for that matter, as long as I'm taking a moment to thank the board members that were here when I was hired. But I do want to wish Sharon and Tim all the best. They were great board members. It's a low-paying, high-intensity job to be a volunteer board member, and I'd like to personally thank both Tim and Sharon. I'd like to welcome Gary, and I'd like to welcome Kevin, and I look forward to working with both of you. And I think it's exciting. I think it's a true testament to this community that we still have people that are willing to step forward and volunteer and bring their expertise. And the thing that keeps Hyde Park going and growing, as I say, is how the community pulls together. So thank you so much for stepping up. And goodbye to Steve as the past president. It was a great year. It really was a year for me to really reflect with a new president on how we put things together and operate, and we certainly bounced a lot of things off and really felt good about where the agendas were going, so I really appreciated that. And congratulations on our new officers, and our not-so-new officer, but Dan, thank you. I think, there is so much to be said about stability and what you bring to the table, and Doug, I'm excited to have a new partner, and
you go.
I think it'll be great. So again, congratulations, Dan and Doug, and I look forward to working with all of the board members. Okay,
Well,
so,
we have also a pact that at least one of the originals has to stay into the 12th year
that's
that you
right.
committed to.
Because I was coming in with the kindergarten class and graduating with them. And then I gave myself the early graduation, didn't I?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. One other update, after the long, hot, rainy season that we've had, especially the last weekend where we've had excessively hot temperatures and a lot of water, we did have some mold when we opened up North Park Elementary School at the end of the long, rainy, hot weekend. We immediately contacted Dave Witherwax at BOCES. He came in by the end of the day. He immediately did some air quality samples. They were fine. There's been some water density type tests that, the preliminary tests, and they were also fine. But certainly the follow-up to mold testing is being done. We should have the results, I think it takes about 48 hours, so we're hoping to have the results by the end of tomorrow. As a precaution, even though the few preliminary tests that they could do turned out fine, but as a precaution, we did relocate the clerical staff and the facilities and operations staff just till we get the free and clear. We're hopeful, but there's no question that, we will do whatever is necessary with the results that we get, and we will keep the board posted. And the only thing that may be a little bit of a glitch is that the ceiling work is scheduled to begin, at the end of this week, and Wayne and I are in constant contact, and we may need to delay that, because if there's any question that we need to do something else as a remedy, the priority would be to remedy that and postpone the ceiling. And if that happened, then we have to find out what the implications are, because we've already gone out to bid, the bids are awarded, the contractors are scheduled to work, so, the domino effect could be in place, but we're ready and we're on top of it, and we will keep everybody informed. Okay.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on to the enrollment update.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yes. Before I begin the formal, a formal presentation, another thing we'll do under superintendent's report, sometimes unofficially and sometimes officially with slides, but we've committed to updating on the athletic facility project. So that is Wayne.
Sure. So since the last time we met, the weather has certainly taken a change a bit. As Greer mentioned, it's been very hot, very rainy, so you can imagine that schedules have, gotten behind. But with that being said, we're not that far behind. So special thanks to the project team that consistently works together to communicate and get together for job meetings once a week. So thanks to the architect, the construction management, our facilities and operations administrators, Linda Steinberg for her accounting pieces to keep these projects moving along. So we are in a good place, and there's some exciting milestones that are coming up. The sound system will be introduced to the project on the track there the second week of July. The scoreboard foundation is being built in the second and third weeks of July. Well testing for the abandoned well we had spoke about at a prior meeting is going to be testing on July 16th to see if we can utilize that. And the bleachers and the press box begin on July 16th as well. Landscaping review with the Hyde Park Visual Environmental Committee is going to happen hopefully next week. But we committed to doing that in July. That's where we're going to work with the Visual Environmental Committee, who are part of our facility steering forum, to look at the landscape that's going to go around it, because that was a concern. That looks really nice. Turf construction is July 22nd. That's the actual field. They will be, I forgot the word, but they're going to be setting up that in the parking lot. So there's going to be limited access to the east side of the parking lot for a limited period of time. And we're working with folks over there to make sure that they have enough room, because you imagine the whole field comes in boxes. So I've learned about that today. The blacktopping, the initial blacktopping and asphalt is during the week of July 29th. The scoreboard takes about 6 weeks to order. All the specifications and bids have been accepted for that, and we hope to see that around August 20th. And you can imagine the amount of timing, coordination, and things that go on in these long meetings that we have once a week to make sure that everything is precisely timed, so that, you know, it was like the domino effect is one thing starts the other thing, conduit to the sign and the PAs, and it's amazing, and it's been a great learning experience for me and the administrators and facilities and operations. So the scoreboard, again, August 20th, rubberized track surface, that's the end of the project. That's where they actually lay the piece of the track. And then in the fall, it gets a little cooler out, put the sod down. So these are the milestones. But other than that, everything is really moving along as best it possibly can. The weather has, you know, put things off a bit. It's about 2 weeks that it's taken us back. We were able to catch up time in the beginning because we were delayed a little bit, and now we've lost that back. So our original track projection completion was, you know, in or around the first or second week of August, and that's moved up to the third or fourth week. In either case, we're still in a good place. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows where we are, and that's the update.
Okay, I think it would help the community. I think what they'd really like to know is, will the first home game be played on that field?
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just speaking with Amy today, and we have not set the date for homecoming yet because we're waiting. So right now, there's a possibility it's the last Friday night in September, but we may want to push that back into early October. And her big concern right now is making sure that the scoreboard is there. So as soon as we know when we have homecoming scheduled, we'll start planning the festivities.
And the first track meet?
It's in the spring.
I think
This spring.
you don't do fall track?
Fall cross country.
Well, yeah, we have,
You don't do that there, though.
You don't do it on the track, you
Yeah.
go to the,
okay. I just want to make
Wilderness.
sure,
the other one is
when
soccer,
they
though.
first have their first meet, I thought it would be a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
That's really been a long time coming, so,
Yeah.
okay.
But the possibility is that the soccer matches might be before the homecoming game.
Oh, right, yes, that's true, too. Mhm. Yeah.
I'm not sure what the plans are for that, but I believe the athletic department had lined up alternate fields in anticipation of delays, so
Yes, there's
we
a
might want to
whole
start
backup
confirming
plan.
that, yeah.
Yeah. I'll get an update. Maybe we can have, well, our next meeting is August 29th, but that would be a good meeting to make announcements of what the backup plan is. Yeah. For, if we need.
Okay, are there any questions on Wayne's report? Let me move on to,
Yes, actually, this gives us the construction schedule for the next 2 or 3 weeks, right? So we expect to have blacktopping, however, the rubberized track surface and the, that is anticipated to be the end of August.
Yeah, some of these things that start, like this is the start time, target construction start, but like, for example, it might go for the duration. Certainly, like the paving, for example, they'll probably do one area, then another area, and there's multiple layers and types of thing that has to happen.
Okay, so these are anticipated start dates. Do we have penciled in completion dates?
That would be, like I said, we were in the first and second week of August initially, but now with the weather delays, we're on to the third and fourth weeks.
Okay.
We're 2 weeks behind.
All right, so that's a statement about the completed project, not necessarily the line items that we have in
Right.
front of us. Okay, good enough. Thank you.
all right. Moving on to enrollment update. Another grim picture.
Where it is here?
That's why I keep my head down.
Just take notes on.
Another on this
Mhm.
I don't get to sit next to them.
Yeah, that's it. We just need to start it from the beginning. Okay, I wanted to give an update on enrollment. Our big mantra is to stay ahead of the curve on this one. So the first slide is a graph of our enrollment. And as you can see, from fall of 2008 to fall of 2012, we have dipped down under to about 3,850 students as opposed to above 4,200. So that's a concern that pattern continues. This is live birth data, and so these are taken. This is we don't have community census anymore, so the only information we have is what's called live birth data, and that's provided by the Department of Education as reported to them. And in 2007, again, you'll see we had a little bit of a dip up in 2010, very minor. And a couple of months ago, we got the 2011 live birth data, and there was a significant drop. So even in the projections that we were looking at, we anticipated minor drops, and that one was a little bit of a surprise when we got that a couple of months ago, that it was under 250 for our catchment area. So we are looking at a continuation of declining enrollment. What we want to do is, as I said, get out ahead of it. Technically, and when we look at our enrollment and capacity report and the capacity of our buildings, the way it's figured is that all of our buildings are under capacity. But that's an antiquated look at how we utilize buildings, because those capacity numbers are calculated that what you do in a school is you have X amount of section. If you have, 50 first graders, you have 2 sections of first grade. If you have 50 second graders, you have 2 sections of second grade. What's not accounted for in the old formula is that we offer academic intervention services, that we have occupational therapy, physical therapy, all kinds of things that go on in the student support area that we need space for. So even though it says that, right now all of our schools technically are under capacity, we know that they're full, and that there are no empty classrooms in the district anymore. So what we want to do is make sure we're looking at it from the perspective of what we need to provide all of the services that we're mandated, and not just a mandate, these are services we want to provide to students because they need them. So I think it's important to know that when we look at this, we want to say, what do we need in order to provide everything our students need? So that is definitely part of what we're going to monitor as we look at this moving forward. What we'd like to do is utilize the facility steering forum. We have an existing group that looks at our facilities, and as we learned from the only time, it was the second time in the history of this school district where we needed to close an elementary school. We want transparency. We want community involvement. We have an existing committee that deals with facilities. So rightly so, this is a committee that can monitor this over time and come up with some recommendations and some projections from at what point we would take action. So we will start off this year with our facility steering forum. We will have 2 items that we will look at this year. One is to finalize the 5-year facilities update plan, and the other is to put together, to really kind of work on this as a community to say, we have 4 elementary school buildings right now. We have declining enrollment. Let's determine what will be our next steps, what will be our trigger to say we need to get serious about next steps, either reopening a school or closing another school. And or explore various configurations. If we are going to if we get to the point where we only need 3 elementary schools, do we redistrict? Our financial forecast is not grim for the next 2 years. Should it become grim and really unbelievably serious again, which it very much could, we may need to look at, well, is there a way to redistrict that has any cost-saving potential? But let's put all the paint on the wall. Let's get some trigger points ready so that we say, we know this is a trigger point and this is a plan, or at least a part of a plan that we can now mobilize and complete. We want to stay ahead of the curve for a number of reasons. We want to stay ahead of the curve for rumor control. We want to stay ahead of the curve on the economic forecast for the health of our district. Again, nobody wants to see redistricting or reconfiguring elementary schools by grade level to save money. But if it means that we have to do that so that we can offer what we consider a comprehensive education, then financially we may have to do that someday. We need to keep an eye on the housing market, the private and parochial enrollment, and first and foremost, doing what's best for our kids. So those are the lenses that we need to look at our future forecasting for enrollment. We need to identify ahead of time and stick to it as much as possible for as long as we possibly can what we value. Right now in this district, we value having the appropriate space for support services for students and not having services provided in open hallways, closets, shower rooms, etc. Right now, that's what we value. Appropriate space for music, art, and physical education. We value having a library in every elementary school. And we value the need to have collaborative space for professional development where possible. And sometimes that may mean the faculty room when it's not lunchtime. We don't have computer lab up there because as part of our technology plan and our technology forecasting, the concept of a computer lab is already obsolete. So we are in the process of looking at that. We're definitely moving way beyond telling students that they need to move to another location so that they can access technology, and I think that speaks for itself. Again, you saw on that one of the earlier slides, we had the fall figures all the way up to 2012. A startling statistic, if you will, is the decline from September of 2012 to June of 2013. Our enrollment decreased by 117 students. This is why I'm here today, and also we've been talking that we need to get ahead of this, but that was really startling. We've had a decrease each year from September to June, but this was pretty significant. We want to be proactive and prepared for fluctuations, both minor and major, and we want the process to be transparent and open. And if anybody has any questions.
Do you have any questions?
Do you have an end date or a goal in mind for when to complete the work of trying to set those thresholds?
Yeah, I'd like to have it complete by the end of next year. Yeah, so that we can identify through this year, and not, through our facility steering forum, identify a threshold for what's the number that could trigger this, a change either way? And then what are options, and a little bit of a floor plan. You don't want to identify the floor plan. We can't solve it, but we can put together a template that we can have ready to mobilize when any of those triggers are met.
Is it part of your plan to try to do some of the preliminary legwork to determine which school would be closed, or is that an item that would be left?
Yeah, I
left
think
open
that,
for a
that
transition
seeing
plan?
how ripped apart our community became the last time, no, I think that is not recommended to identify, because it's not about the building. It is about the building, as we know, because it's an emotional and real, you know, a real, I'm trying to think of the word, but it, you know, a community school is a community school, and people feel as strongly, everybody feels strongly about their elementary school, you know, and I think at this point, what we're trying to do is get ahead of the curve with the numbers, and then when we need to mobilize the next step to say we need to reopen, well, that's obvious. We're not going to open Statsburg. We don't own it anymore. The reopen is easy. It would be Hyde Park Elementary. But if we have that trigger point and we need to say, let's move forward and start talking about closing an elementary school, we should initiate that conversation. One of the things that we can do, too, is that we can get a lot of, at that point, there may be some really clear information as to geographic areas that are declining and what would make the best sense for transportation. There are too many unknowns. We could find out that in 5 years, one of our buildings needs such an extraordinary amount of work to maintain that, you know, maybe a different option. So there's too many factors in determining which one. And it's going, you know, if we ever got there, it's going to be painful enough to do that. We're just trying to stay ahead of the curve for the numbers and not pit the people against each other. And, you know, we run a risk right now, just what I'm saying right now, you know, it's out there. We're talking about closing an elementary school, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about we need to be proactive and look at numbers, because that's a reality. So we already know that within 30 seconds, electronically, messages could be sent out, and that will create some discontent in the community or rumors. And so I really encourage people to stay informed and to participate in the process in a way that will be helpful. And we hope we never have to get there again. I certainly hope we never have to get there again, but we can't ignore the fact that we might.
You know, it wasn't last year, it was the year before. You know, being off the board for a couple of years, and I guess I saw the enrollment study. Something brought me to FDR the night that was presented. I think it might have been that. And I remember reading the numbers and being absolutely thunderstruck by how much the enrollment had dropped since my time on the board. You know, and yeah, there was a lot of, obviously the last year and the year before, a lot of emotion, and rightfully so. There's a lot of attachment to a neighborhood school. When you take the emotional hat off, you know, and look at it realistically, you realize something needed to be done, because this isn't We don't have endless amount of financial resources. It's just not going to continue. We have to recognize, or did have to recognize, that schools were built, from 1939 on in this school district one at a time because the enrollment swelled. We went through the baby boom generation, and Hyde Park and IBM, when IBM really got going, both between Poughkeepsie and Kingston, Hyde Park really swelled into this huge bedroom community, and I'd like to say it's going to be like that, but I'm not convinced it's going to stay that way. But that's for time to tell. But we have to be realistic. So I guess what I was going to suggest is, I'm not so sure we need to see this every meeting, but the numbers do change. I don't know, maybe at the end of every marking period, for example, so that we're not beating people over the head with it, but we're keeping it in the forefront, so, giving it to the board's fine, it's slipped in a packet, you look at it every week, you go, well, I'm sorry, I was speaking about the old days when it came in an envelope. I meant on board docs, you could attach a document and say, here's the current enrollment across the schools, and that's all interesting and all that. But I really think it is important as part of this process to keep the community informed by making it available, whether it's even just quarterly, at it, just like even if it's a quicker presentation, you don't have to obviously go through all the things you did, because there's nothing really more to talk about other than what are the numbers?
Right.
What are we looking at? It could be one slide, but just so people can see, so that if we get to a decision point, whether it's reopening Hyde Park Elementary, wouldn't that be wonderful, or we got to do something else, that people are not shocked and thunderstruck by it, that they say, we saw this coming. We don't like it, but we saw it coming.
Yeah.
So.
I can't agree with you more, Kevin, because even just looking at that drop from September to June
It's a lot
this
of
year,
kids. Yeah.
I knew 3 months ago that that this was the direction we were going. We were going to give an update, and yes, we were going to give an update at the reorg, and I was surprised that it was 100 and what was it, 17?
117, yeah.
117. So, good idea to just quarterly, here are numbers, and they can fluctuate either way, but that's startling.
Right.
I did
Well,
also.
and be off the board for 5 years and watch it go from what was it, 4,500 or whatever when I left to, 3,800 or something like that. It's literally a large entire school.
Yes.
Disappeared.
Yeah,
in those 6
exactly.
years. And it was just like, I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, and, and the reality, IBM just laid off another 700 employees, and I know most of them were Fishkill, but, there are people that work in Fishkill
Sure.
that live here, so,
There's something to say, too, that's just as a point of comment to the community, because I say it a lot to other people, because a lot of people ask me, and it's, well, New York State's terrible. Everyone's fleeing New York State. Yeah, there's little bits of that, absolutely. But we have to look at, you were a child of the 60s and 70s, as was I, and some of us around, in the room and in the table. The reality is there are not as many people having as many kids.
absolutely.
The whole dynamics changed. I grew up with families that were just, 4, 5, 6 kids. And now couples that don't have any kids, or maybe it's 1 or 2, and that's and also because I was on the tail end of the baby. I don't even technically, I'm not a baby boomer. I think I'm I don't know where I am. I'm after 64, so I'm not a baby boomer technically.
Nobody's claiming
So that big bubble, has now moved way past having kids.
Yep.
And so the kids they have are having less kids, and that's gonna continue, and that's reality.
It's reality,
So.
yeah. I also wanted to end by saying that Wayne is going to be giving a report at the next meeting, because we're waiting for our auditor's report on the cost savings for closing Hyde Park Elementary. I said at the very beginning and throughout every presentation I made that our figures were estimates, and we were being conservative. And, right, Wayne, the preliminary results that we have indicate that I was being very conservative. But the worst thing you want to do is say, oh, we're going to save all this money, and whoa, we didn't save that much money, so you're conservative. And so we will be putting together what the cost savings of closing the elementary school was.
I agree. As part of the planning over the next 3 or 4 years as we go, I think there's a couple of things that have to be worked upon. You have a figure in here for live births over a period of time. In no way, shape, or form does that number give us anywhere near the information we used to get from a survey, our own survey in the district, where we used to go out every year or every 2 years and contact every household in the district and determine the number and the families and the ages of the families. We don't know how many of those kids have already left the district. And we don't know how many of them are coming in. The other thing, I think we need to reach out to the realty industry, especially now. I don't know, I've seen 2 articles in the last maybe 2 months. One today, I believe it was, regarding the fact that there is an uptick, a significant uptick in the number of dwellings being sold, and the cost of those dwellings. It's starting to, we're at a point where they're saying the prices are starting to rise because the available housing in the area is becoming limited. We know that there's not been very much building over an extended period of time, but we're starting to see homes sell, and we're seeing the prices to start going back up because of the fact that the market is limited as to houses available. And I don't know if the realty industry can provide us any information as to what percentage are coming from out of the district. It can still be within Dutchess County, because that's more probable, people moving within the county to better homing at a better price, and that kind of stuff, and also the size of the families. So I think we need to look at that to be able to better project or get information from the figures that we are provided with, because the live birth figure seems to be a totally useless figure in terms of projections of what effect it's going to have on our school district and the classes.
Yep. Yeah, and we do have a member of the community who, on the facility steering forum, who is a realtor and really helps us out with getting some of that information, and we'll definitely tap into that. It's also been suggested, as you just suggested, there are communities that actually have one meeting where you specifically invite all the realtors in the area for 2 purposes. One, to find out what's going on, and the other is to really advertise what we're doing and what we're doing well, so that when they're talking to prospective buyers, they can say, hey, this is what our school district offers. So that's kind of twofold, and that's definitely something worth pursuing.
Yeah, it's obvious they can bring unsolicited and untainted information to the district, because they're talking to people and they get the impressions, oh yeah, Hyde Park's a good place to go, or Hyde Park's a place you want to stay away from, that kind of information. When you want to ask that question directly, the answers tend to be clouded, but when they're coming from people that are involved in it, I think you get a better picture of what it is or where we stand, and are there things we can do to improve our status.
Greer, is live birth data, how long have we been getting that? I see, this graph shows since 2007. Is this something that...
I know we have it further back than that.
Okay. I just wondering, and I agree with Dan to some extent that it's only a partial picture,
Right.
the live birth data. And just wondering if you could, what it would take to look at live birth data projections to what the actual enrollment was.
There is a formula, and I can get that for you.
Yeah, is there historical information that shows, a typical trending where, if we're looking at 2011, live birth data is saying 240, which they're going to be coming to school in 2016. How many, instead of 240, is it going to be, 320? Is it, or
Right,
or would it trend to be 200?
In the report that we do have, there is one chart that has the live birth and the actual enrollment and how they do their projections. So we can definitely just continue that.
It'd be interesting to
because
see
it
if
gives
there's
you the
anything.
plus or minus. So it's not accurate data, but it can give
trending.
you some yes.
It's
yeah,
trending.
Yeah.
And the other
and of
thought.
course, the thing you can anticipate is the big spike or peak that doesn't follow the trend. And
Well, the 117 that we lost since
that's not
September, has, that's unexplainable. I mean, you don't know. The only other thought I had was, do you, as a matter of practice, look at each building to say, this is the number of students that we can absorb into a particular school or into a particular, or, each school grade by grade to know when do we start getting into trouble with having too many kids, say in 4th grade at North Park, or do you watch that? Is that something that?
Yeah, we definitely watch that, because if enrollment spikes at a certain grade level and we need to open up a section, we need to figure out where to open that section.
Yeah.
And I know right now at Violet Avenue, if there's an influx and we need to open up a section at Violet Avenue for whatever reason next year, somebody has to go back into inferior space.
Yeah, and the other part of that would be, as we're looking at, whether we ever have to close another school or whether we need to open another school, would be to get a sense as to how many students can we add in each building before we have to think about, something more drastic like opening another building and.
Right.
And what that means.
Yeah,
Like I
and
say,
what
pushing somebody back into a shower room. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a huge question because they don't come in evenly across the grade level, so it gets really tricky. But we can definitely set some parameters. But, that's the hard part. They don't all come in evenly spread K through 5.
Right.
You get those
All right.
influxes that vary.
Thank you.
I just have one comment. If you look at the numbers on the last report for the schools, you can see that each grade level at the high school is 50 students more than the grade level in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And if you look at the grade level numbers in 6th, 7th, and 8th, you'll see that each class, with an exception of one bubble thing, is 50 students more than the classes in the elementary school. So the high school in the next 3 years is going to, by definition, have 150 less students.
Yeah.
So you have to worry about that.
And that we've
too.
been monitoring, and because, that means staffing, that means less staffing. We've been following that every year because, and the next 3 years at the high school, it's going to be hit hard.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Is there any other discussion? Then we move on.
I just had one comment. I just thought of it, and it doesn't. It's not going to fix anything right now, but you're still involved with the council of superintendents, school superintendents, and something maybe we should jump on with NISBA. This thing popped into my head. Maybe I'm nuts, but the state collects a lot of data when they try to lift our taxes from us. No, right? So think about your state income tax return. You have to say what school district you live in, and you also have to list your dependents. All right, so they collect all this nonsense. Why don't, you should get the state to pass a law that says, oh, by the way, you're going to feed back to the school district, very light information, but, how many kids are born in, that are 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old? Because that will give you a pretty good idea. People are going to move in and out, but that's going to give you that's probably the best numbers you can get.
Absolutely.
Everyone's got to do an income tax return, or just most everybody, and they got a list of dependents, and they got the birth dates on there, and you could get a whole lot of information real quick from the state.
I don't think they have it. I think the NSA has all that data.
What's that?
I think the NSA has all that.
Yeah, they're listening in. Testing, 1, 2, testing. No, but you know what I mean? That would be productive legislation.
Yeah.
To actually require the state income tax or the taxation department to turn that information over to school districts.
We could
Because you get it by code, everyone's got to put the code on it, and then how many kids are, at this age, up through basically 5. You don't really need to know everybody else. You know your existing population.
Right.
But who's coming up?
yeah. And the interesting thing to extract that data is they would need a formula for places like this. We have Hyde Park in its entirety. We have a piece of the town of Poughkeepsie.
Well, no, because you have to put your school district
district
code
in.
on
Oh,
your
school
state
district
income
code,
tax.
yeah.
Oh,
So
okay,
it's
yeah,
already
yeah.
So if you live in
You can
Fairview,
tell
you're
I don't
putting
compare
Hyde Park
my own
schools.
taxes.
That's assuming people do the right tax code, but yes, you're supposed to put the school district code on there too. So it would be so easy to go grab that information and get it to school districts, but you probably need legislation that say you must provide this information.
I like
to
the
school
sound of mandates in reverse.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put a little work on them.
Yeah.
Because it would actually provide a benefit to school districts and help them plan. So it might be something to pursue with superintendents.
Who's our
and NISBA.
legislative liaison?
Yeah, that's,
Didn't take long, did it?
No, it didn't. It didn't.
collecting all this anyway.
All right,
Why don't
can
they give it to us so we can
move
use
on
it?
to the,
Let me, one more thought, please.
there you go. One more thought.
I know looking at population, Dutchess has kind of been steadier moving up a little bit. But if you look at the districts throughout Dutchess and across the river, the urban districts are rising up in population, and the suburban districts are going down. So that trend is there. People are moving closer to the cities. Poughkeepsie, Kingston, Newburgh. So that trend might be part of this, what you're losing here.
Well, it will affect Coquitlam Avenue for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, as Cora, I'm going to make a comment as Cora's coming up to do her presentation on the survey. The survey was conducted because we are a focus school. And one of the things that Cora and I are definitely exploring is next steps for two reasons. One, the data that's presenting itself definitely says there's a need to have some strategic community conversations and an initiative with the intent to build trust and facilitate community engagement in looking at some of the things that our surveys reveal. And we're looking at a continued relationship with K-12 Insights. They are the organization that has this survey, but the other part, the bigger piece of what they do is strategic planning for community conversations. So we'll be putting together a proposal. We can do this through a BOCES COSER. Some of it we can utilize title funding that needs to be designated for community outreach and parent involvement, and plus some contractual money that we have. But we feel that we would like to take this and utilize this organization to take this to the next level. So you'll be hearing some more on that at the next board meeting.
Great. Thank you, Greer. Just as a reminder, we've been talking about data a lot in the last, decade or more, I guess, but particularly in the last few years. And in our strategic planning process, we talk about 4 different kinds of data and the idea of using multiple measures. So we talk about achievement data, which is pretty self-explanatory, and you hear from me at least once a year on that note. We talk about demographic data, which really describes the who, who are we, who are our students, how many of them are there, where are they going when they leave us, as referenced in the previous conversation. We talk about process data, which is how do we do business here? What does our referral to special education process look like? What does the registration process look like? And then we talk about perceptual data. And what I'm sharing with you tonight is really a fine example of perceptual data. And there are many out there, I think, who wonder about the value of that because it's not as scientific as what percentage of students passed a test. But it's really important to us to know what people think and believe. I don't know who said it, but someone once said there's no such thing as a misperception. It's someone's perception, whether it's grounded in fact or not. If that's what people are holding as a belief or an assumption about what's happening, it's important for us to understand that. So this is an example of perceptual data. We are required to do these surveys as a result of our accountability status, and we are a focus district for the purposes of those accountability measures. The accountability indicator is for Haviland and for FDR, and in both cases, the reason for that accountability status is based on the performance of our students who are experiencing those economic challenges. So our students who are receiving free and reduced lunch are one of the groups that are looked at when all of the assessment data is analyzed. So you might remember, and for those of you that are new or listening for the first time, districts are assessed on both the performance and the participation of all students, and then it's also broken out so that we look at how just our students with disabilities are doing, how just our students who self-identify as African American or Hispanic are doing, how our students who are economically disadvantaged are doing. And in this case, we've been concerned for a number of years about the gap in performance between our students who receive free and reduced lunch and their peers who do not. So we are here in part because we're required to do so based on accountability. The state provided just 2 options for districts to adopt for the purpose of collecting all of this perceptual data, and they both are tools that support this diagnostic tool for school and district evaluation. This is a very comprehensive evaluation tool that is being used to both self-evaluate in some districts and then have an evaluation process completed with members of the state education department, in-district staff, and an outside expert in each case. So the survey tools that were presented to us to choose for the process of getting this data were both things that really supported the tenets that are in this evaluation tool. Very quickly, what happens for districts in our situation is that a team from the state education department will come next year. We've been told that that will happen in the fall. There'll be 3 or 4 people from state ed. There'll be an outside expert that we actually have chosen. In our case, it's Jim Viola, who is a very long-term, very highly respected state ed staff member. And then our district employees will participate to some degree. Using this tool, this DTSDE, this very comprehensive rubric, all of these different areas, these 6 areas on the slide, are evaluated. And so when we look at things like district leadership and capacity, it's really looking very, very broad brush. Not necessarily about how district leaders, such as Greer and myself, might personally be doing, but what do things look like in the district that are led from the very top of the hierarchy or the organizational chart, if you will. School leader practices and decisions really speaks to, as you might guess, what happens in the building and those things that are really under the control of the building principal. Curriculum development and support is really what are we teaching, how are we teaching it, do we have the right resources to provide the instruction that we hope to provide for our students. Teacher practices and decisions, very much like what you would think. What are teachers actually doing? And student social and emotional health are all of those indicators around the whole child. How are students reporting their perceptions of safety within the school? Are they reporting that they have some control over what their day looks like? Do they have input on decisions that are made about what their day looks like? How are they being supported for all of the social, emotional, and behavioral concerns that our students have? And then family and community engagement, which we've talked about a number of times, and the community and families have been surveyed on that topic a couple of times, at least in my tenure. So the tools that are used for this particular process have questions that are all connected to those 6 areas. As I mentioned, we were offered 2 choices. We chose this one in part because, as Greer was mentioning, the company that provides it is really much more than just providing surveys. They do a lot of curriculum work. They do a lot of support of strategic planning processes. They do the community and family engagement. So they were a much richer product and company. We actually did our contract with 2 other districts so that we could have a little cost savings. The cost of the actual tool is, and process and support, is $20,000, for which we received grant money from the state ed department. We did not need to use district funds for that purpose. But because we because we collaborated with 2 other districts, we only paid 1/3 of that, which was great. We did create survey links on both the district and individual building websites, and although the survey requirement was for Haviland and FDR due to accountability, we felt it was very important and an opportunity to make the surveys available for all of our schools. So that was done. Letters to parents and to students and to staff were sent encouraging participation. And those were sent, but they were posted, they were sent home. We collaborated with 2 of our local libraries, and in the letter indicated to families that if they did not have access to computers, they could either come to the school and do that or go to their local libraries. And we appreciated that collaboration. There was a 2-week window for our parents and staff to go into the link and complete the survey. We did, I should note, offer the opportunity for hard copies of the survey if people would prefer that. We actually didn't have any requests for that, but we did make that offer. We extended the time period for student participation. The first run of that in a couple of our buildings didn't yield as much participation of our students as we had hoped for, so we actually extended that window and got a much better participation rate. Students were given the opportunity to complete the surveys during school, but we did not want instructional time jeopardized. So at no point was a science class canceled so that students could go to the library or a lab to complete the surveys. However, if students were already in a class that included a lab, so for example, if they were in a business course in the lab, the teachers were asked to give students the opportunity to complete the survey, knowing that it might take 10 or 15 minutes at the very most for students to do that. This is just a chart of the number of participants that we had for each building and in each area. For Ralph R. Smith, where you see that very glaring empty box, that does not indicate that none of them participated. We had a very small number, but it was so small that we couldn't include those in any way that would be statistically relevant or even paint a large picture. So I believe the actual number was 6 or 7, not enough to be included in any compilation of summary data. So, because the nature of this survey is such that it really isn't appropriate at the surface level to say, here is the whole district's results. As we've said and even mentioned earlier this evening, individual schools are in and of themselves their own little communities and have their own cultures. So to give you an aggregate that says 67% of teachers across the entire district feel this way would be very misleading. So as Greer and I struggled a little bit with the very best way to share this with you in a short period of time, we decided that we would take one building and give you a sampling of the results and the kinds of questions that were posed, and then talk about how we will work with our building principals, our building leadership teams, and other mechanisms for sharing that information to really delve into it more deeply. So we chose Haviland, and we thought we would begin with our students. Their voices aren't often heard as loudly or clearly as we might like. So for the students who responded at Haviland, these are things that they identified as relative strengths. And by relative strengths, I mean that they indicated or that at least 80% of the students who responded indicated that they either had high agreement or very high agreement with this statement. So for example, 80% of our students said either I strongly agree or I agree that I have access to computers and the internet. I have the textbooks I need. Yes.
I have to interject.
Sure.
We're talking about less than a quarter of the student body that answered.
Right.
So how can, I don't see 80% of those students maybe, but it's not 80% of the
That's
Haviland
absolutely true.
population. So I don't see the value in these numbers, I guess. Somebody can explain
Sure.
it to me.
Well, and what I would just add is that in working with the company, you know, anytime you do a survey, we saw this with the exit survey for polling. We've seen it with other surveys. There's a need to look at the the number of respondents that are required in order to have any kind of meaning attached to feedback. You know, some people would say if you have a 25% response rate, that's pretty good, depending on what the survey is, what you're probing, et cetera. We would certainly love to have much higher. And the company itself will say to us, and in fact, in the case of the students, initially they said, we're not generating reports for you because the participation rate is too low. So in each of these cases where I'm sharing data, the company, based on their work across the country and in thousands of schools, felt that we're not suggesting we make absolute conclusions, but there is value in looking at the responses that we do have. And yes, we have to be very clear. I'm not saying 80% of our students said this. 80% of the students who responded. So we do have to keep that as a lens. No one is saying that this is absolute. But it is perceptual data. It's worth hearing from those students who did participate. So these are the things that were rated the most highly by this group of students. I have the textbooks I need. Teachers set high expectations for my work. I know what it takes to do well in school. I can redo my work to get better grades. I'll let you read for yourself. But those are the things that the students rated the most highly. And you can see, wait, I'm sorry, Wayne, just go back one more. You can see as you look at the prompts that they come from multiple areas. So some of those came from teacher practices, some of them come from curriculum expectations. That last one, there's someone I can talk to about school problems, falls under that social, emotional, and wellness domain. So their identification of strengths were drawn from each of the 6 areas as I was trying to summarize the data. Areas of concern. Only 15% of our students who responded at the middle school felt that the food they receive is fresh and of a high quality. 43% said that teachers lecture most of the time. 76% of these respondents said that they are treated differently because of race, culture, language, religion, gender, or sexual orientation. It's a pretty high number, and we're going to come back to that statement in a few minutes. Again, concern about that social emotional piece. This year I've been scared that someone at school was going to hurt me. This year I brought something to school for protection. We didn't ask them what, but 84% of the kids who responded indicate that they had done that. And 56% of the students responding said, I enjoy going to school each day. So those are the areas that jump off the page for us as the concerns students are identifying. Shifting to parents, and again, these are samples, and I should state that all of the surveys are going to be put on the district and individual building links, not just the survey itself, but the full reports. So people will be able to go in. One of the reasons that that we provided the surveys is so that we can be transparent in the results. If you're asked to complete a survey, you should have access to the results. So these are samples of questions. There are many more. For each of those 6 domains, there are about 15 to 20 questions. So before school starts again in the fall, all of the reports for each building will be on the individual building websites and on the district webpage. So for parents, they too identified that students have access to computers and the internet. 85% identified support for the school's mission. There was a feeling that the school provides a caring environment. 80% felt that their child is challenged. And 83% identified teachers being available to discuss their child's needs. So as you can see, some of those are particular to parents' perception of how their students are feeling, and then also how they're feeling themselves. Are they feeling welcome in the building? Are they feeling comfortable calling the school and expressing a concern? And then the concerns. We had 46% of our parents indicate that teachers tailor instruction to meet students' strengths and interests. 84% of our parents felt that their child was treated differently due to race, language, religion, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. 43% indicated that school leaders seek parent input on how best to meet their students' needs, and 66% reported that their child often seems bored or disinterested. And teachers. Again, relative strengths. A clean school, and that falls under that district leadership piece. Just by way of a couple of items of interest, when you think about district leadership, you might not necessarily think about things like the quality of the food, student statements like I get enough to eat at school, the cleanliness of the buildings. Those particular items fall under the district leadership domain. Teacher response, I'm aware of my school's improvement plan. I feel respected by other teachers. The curriculum I teach is strong, relevant, and aligned with the standards.
Is this the Haviland, or is this?
This is
This
all
is
Haviland,
just
yeah.
It's all
Haviland.
Haviland.
All of this is just Haviland.
I have to tell you, that second bullet bothers me a little bit. I mean, you have a lot of different perceptions of that, different
Sure.
things. I get that, but boy, I mean, that should be 100%.
Should be 100%.
Every,
Yes, yeah.
We're not communicating the message if that's the case.
Right. So, Kevin, what I would just add there is that, again, it's relative strengths, meaning that item fared better than certain others. Go ahead, Wayne, and thank you. 87% of the teachers indicated that student progress is closely monitored, that they use data to identify strengths and weaknesses. Now, take a look at that last bullet.
Talk about perception.
Exactly. So there's a little term that we use in my world called triangulating data. It's a very fancy way of saying take 3 different things and put them together and see what you get. 3 points of data. So in this sense, we have the same prompt, but the 3 sets of data is the perception of students, the perception of parents, the perception of teachers. And I'm going to come back to that one again in a moment. Wayne, go ahead. Concerns identified on the part of teachers included the level of parent or caregiver involvement, level of disrespect demonstrated by students, their own ability to meet the individual needs of each and every student. Here's another one where there's perhaps different perception. Our parents and students identified, pretty good access to technology. Our teachers said, no, we don't have enough. And the school is well maintained was reported at 8%. So, and we all have our perceptions about that perceptual data, I'm sure, going on. So, what I was speaking about in terms of triangulating the data, or really in more simple terms, trying to make connections. Here we have an example of where we have a real discrepancy in responses that really warrants some further conversation and exploration. We have 76% of our students and 84% of our parents who participated, again, in the survey, that they're treated differently based on a whole host of differences. And yet 87% of our teachers feel that all students are being treated fairly and equitably. That's a pretty interesting discrepancy. And it's not the only discrepancy. For me, it was perhaps most appealing in terms of what to share with you because of the nature of the statement and because of our concerns with the new Dignity for All Act, with concern about school violence in general. So that kind of a discrepancy really warrants conversation. And, the other example being the access to technology, which is not perhaps as disturbing on an emotional level, but one of interest certainly. So anywhere that we have those discrepancies in responses, it's worth taking a further look at. Just as important is where we have great agreement among groups where it's really good, or complete agreement where this is a real concern. So that's just, how we might continue to take a look at the data.
Cora, before you go on, I'm just surprised. There was one there that struck me that it's not on this list of discrepancies, and that's the one about the students feeling safe. The Haviland School said 72% of the students said they feel challenged or at risk of harm, yet 81% of the parents said that their students are safe.
Yeah, it's another example. Yeah, there are many, Dan.
Okay.
And just in terms of time, and, this wasn't necessarily meant to analyze all aspects of it, but yes, you're correct that that's another example of where we have a discrepancy between the way kids are reporting and the way parents are reporting. And one thing I should note is that there is no evidence, nor is there any way to get evidence of any direct link between teacher, parent, or student. So there's no way of knowing that my student filled the survey and I filled out the survey, and the teacher who filled out the survey works with my student. So these are not necessarily little families of people. They are a group of anonymous students, a group of anonymous parents, and a group of anonymous teachers.
And if you remember, before Cora started to give the presentation, this is exactly why we feel that we would like to continue this with somebody who's going to systematically come in and do the community, I'm losing my train of thought here, but the community conversations, to do systemic community conversations, because this is just, this is valuable information, but this isn't the conversation. This just helps steer
Right.
what we should be asking, where we should be probing, and we would like to continue this work in a real, meaningful, deep, and comprehensive way. And so that's why we're looking at the proposal.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'll add is that the work that we want to continue with K-12 is important. The other relationship that this data will have to our improvement efforts is that, again, it was required by state ed that we do this at least for Haviland and FDR. So when the review is occurring in the fall, this will be one set of data that whole team will look at. They will also look at demographic data. They will also look at achievement data. They will also look at process data. So this becomes one data set, nothing that we can hang our hat on by itself. So starting with sharing the data with the staff, students, parents, building level teams, our strategic planning committee, sharing these results and comparing them. Remember, in Greer's first year, we did a survey that yielded some good participation and helped us frame a lot of questions. And so what's the relationship between these results and the results of that survey? Is there some data analysis that we could be doing there? Are we hearing some patterns of response, even though the prompts might be different? And then as we do all of that data analysis and have a larger conversation with larger and different participation, how do we identify what the strategies are for improvement? And then I'd like to hope that we also take time to celebrate our successes, because we have some of those too.
Anybody have any comments?
Yeah. Will the raw data be available to the board for our own analysis?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, the reports for each building are exactly what we'll be sharing with everyone, actually.
Do we have an access database or something similar?
What I'll be sharing with the board, unless you direct me otherwise, is links to the report for each building. I can provide them in hard copy, but I know most of you would prefer not.
Okay, so.
I don't know that we have the kind of raw data you're asking for.
Right,
Okay.
that was my next question. We don't have it in the
No.
same format that we would, for example, the exit poll. We had all of the data compiled across each survey. for the exit poll.
Because we did it ourselves, yes.
We don't have access to it at that
Well,
level of
How
detail.
raw are you thinking? Tell me what
I would
it
like,
might look like.
I would like access to a database that has all of the individual responses, so that correlations could be drawn between answers on an individual basis.
That we don't have. Yeah, I'll show you what I do have, and then we can certainly have a conversation with the company around what other reports they might provide. I know they're very tight on their security around ensuring anonymity, so they would certainly only provide that to us, which allows them to still guarantee that.
Yeah, I'm not interested in anything that violates anonymity.
Yeah.
However, there are, for example, in the exit poll, there were some conclusions you could draw when you could see how people answered two questions combined.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we can certainly probe with them the additional reports that are available and ask them just how far we can drill down.
Okay.
I can do that.
Any other comments? I just have one. The one that troubles me the most is the 87% report students are treated fairly. That means 13% of those surveyed admit that they treat students unfairly. I would think that would be 100%, because who would admit that? I mean, I'm actually appalled that 13% of those teachers that responded actually said, yeah, I treat them unfairly.
Usually they're
Is
referring
that what the
to someone
response
else.
is?
Yeah.
Is that what the response is? I could perceive 13% of the teachers saying, I have tailored some of the teaching in trying to tailor it to students, and I've modified what I've taught based on the knowledge I have of the students.
The question was unfairly. They treated unfairly.
Right, but the exact way that it's written
I missed that?
as a teacher is not, I do it.
Yeah,
It says students at school are treated fairly regardless of their race, culture, religion, sexual orientation, gender, or disability. So it's not a teacher saying, yeah, no, I don't do that. It's saying, if I
I might
think
be worse than the other.
school-wide,
Right.
I have concerns that not every child is treated fairly.
Okay.
right.
That's still
It's not a
concern.
personal admission.
It's just as big a concern.
I'm not making it better by any means. I'm just clarifying that no teacher is saying, I treat kids unfairly.
That whole section is a concern. The
Yes.
disconnect between the parents, the students, and the teachers is a huge concern.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we could give them points for honesty and then get rid of them. Thank you, Cora.
Yeah, a lot of work to do there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is work that is not, this is why we're looking at really going after the services that are provided, because this is the tip of the iceberg, and this takes a huge concerted effort to lead a community through this process to say, how can we take this deeper? How do we make this meaningful? So,
Yeah, I mean, we know when we see the results, test results, graduation rates, et cetera, we are certainly not the top of the heap in Dutchess County, and we've got some room for improvement. So, I think, this is a good jumping off point, but, yeah, we've got a lot of work to do.
yep.
Okay, for the moment we've all been waited for, I have a motion to enter public participation.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? Would anybody care to address the board? There you are. Oh, come on, just give me a chance to, do something different here, because you know how I view public participation. If you're the only one to speak, I'll let you speak as long as you want.
Okay, thanks. I just really have a quick question. It was actually based on the survey. I'm Tracy Farrell, 29 Mansion Drive. I guess it's a concern for me. Why was the number of teachers that actually responded so low? If we can't get our teachers to respond, what the information to me seems like it's almost void, and it's invalid, because then you can't compare the data that comes from the student participation and the parents versus what the teachers have to say, because the teachers and the students really have a sense of what a building is like. And was it touched upon why administrators were not also included in that? And I guess for me, it was, I think, a safe bet to present the Haviland results, because no administrator really could become under fire because we had such a turnover this year at Haviland. So I'm not sure even that those results are, that valid either. So just a few points to think about. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Wayne? No? All right, can I have a motion to close public
So
participation?
moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? We're closed. All right. And now,
I'll respond first.
would anybody like to respond to
Yeah,
the
I'll start and then
brave
Cora will.
person who got up and said something?
Thank you, Tracy. I'll start and then Cora will fill in. We chose, there was no hidden agenda to choose Haviland because they didn't have leadership there. In fact, one of the interesting things about the Haviland survey was when asked about, does my principal care about me, they got really high ratings. It was while Steve Chaikin was there. We wanted to choose a school that was one of the focus schools, and also kind of like the middle-level voice is, from a student perspective, is very interesting to hear middle-level students. And all the surveys will be, as we said, will be available, will be definitely highlighted at PTA meetings, community conversations. So there was no hidden agenda there to choose one over the other, but I do have to say, when asked about the building leadership at Haviland, the student response was very positive. The other is, and Cora will have more information too, a survey is voluntary, and you'd like to have participation, but it's like looking at the voters in the district. We have 18,000 people. We get X amount of people out to vote. It's unusual, the response, but we can't force people to fill out a survey. And if you start making it mandatory, it defeats the purpose of really getting a true voice. So we have to keep it voluntary. We'd like to see more. One of the things that they do find is if you build a culture, and this is part of what this organization does, if you build a culture of trust, and that where you're headed is real open, deep dialogue, you will have more participation if you continue the process and you act on it. And that people feel like, okay, if I'm going to give you my voice, and then there's going to be some action and follow-up, you will get greater participation, and that's our goal. Right now, there's, you start to do something like this, you're going to have people who still feel that Big Brother is behind that computer, and we're utilizing that data in a negative way. So until we build trust that where we're really headed is community conversations that are inclusive and productive, we're not there yet. That's just another indicator that we're not there, and we need to build trust. And Cora, sorry.
I would just add one small thing, and that was to your question about the administrators. The survey is specifically designed for teacher input, so there were not prompts embedded in the survey to gather the administrative perspective. That's something that we do, in other ways. And there is, as part of the evaluation process with state ed, focus groups with the administrative teams and with individuals within the buildings. So some of that perceptual data will be gathered during that process. But this particular survey purposely excludes the school leaders and focuses on the teaching staff. You're welcome.
I guess I have one question to follow up there. Will this survey be done multiple years? Will it be done again next year? I mean, it's like the exit poll.
Right.
We got a little data this year. Hopefully we get more next year. Perhaps this discussion will allow us to get better data the next time around.
Yeah, I can't say that we've made that as a definite decision yet, to do it next year or to do it every 2 years. I would hope that in part would come out of the conversation that we have with K-12.
Yeah.
And that all of those groups that we're talking about meeting with would have some input to that as well.
I thought this was the actual survey itself was taken in response to a requirement from the state because of our classification as a focus school.
It was. So the requirement was do it this year just for our focus schools.
Oh, so
We
the state
chose
requirement is only to do the
everyone.
first one?
That's correct.
Ah.
Yep.
And
But
I
think
know,
we see tremendous value and opportunity in it, so.
and in part of the proposal for moving forward with this work, that is what they do, are the follow-up surveys and little offshoots of it, but it's not about surveying, and they're really adamant about that. It's about building that trust. Trust is the hardest part about this whole process. Right now, people would look at these surveys, and their immediate reaction is mistrust on every level. How did we do it? How did we collect it? And where we want to go is beyond survey. We want to go beyond survey to building trust, building capacity, and really engaging the community in conversations and follow-up.
All right, any other discussion? We'll move on to the consent agenda.
Board
Isn't that
discussion.
next? Oh, meeting location, I'm sorry, just jumped over. All right, the last meeting or the meeting before, we discussed the
Can I
possibilities.
interrupt? I'm sorry.
Yep.
I never, ever, ever do this, but I am going to interrupt and ask for one thing because I think we're about to enter another lengthy conversation, or what could be. And, no, I don't need a recess, but we have personnel here that are on the agenda, and we have some children here.
Oh, yeah.
That
Yeah.
would like to participate.
can-
And I'm just wondering if we could move the personnel up.
Yeah, can we do the,
I didn't think it was going to be a long discussion, but we can do that.
I move that we rearrange the agenda to make personnel the next topic for discussion.
you know what, can we move the discussion down right before public participation? We can get rid of all the routine business, and then if anybody, they can hear that conversation, those that are here, and if they want to comment on the board meeting locations, that'll give them an opportunity to comment on it.
So move 13 down to after 15.
Yeah.
Or 16.
Right.
I second that.
Which
Okay.
motion did you second, mine or Mr. Sheehan's?
Mr. Shands. Nothing wrong with yours, but
Let's get the voting over with and send people on their way that don't want to stick around.
Okay, so we're going to move on to 14. 13 is going to be, do I have a motion to move it down? Do I have
You
a
have a
second?
second,
you
yep.
have a second.
All those in favor? Okay.
I'll move number 14, the consent item agendas, which includes the personnel matters.
Second.
We have any discussion? You want to recognize the,
Yeah, on the consent agenda, we have a number of appointments, and a few of them are here with us, and I'd like to acknowledge them and have them have a moment of recognition. We have Heather Dennis, who is not new to us, but is moving up, and a promotion to the Director of K-12 Special Education. She is here, and I see she has her family here, which is why I wanted to move this up, as I'm sure that they're probably anxious to go home.
very
We-
well behaved, too.
And, we also would like to welcome Joanna Murphy, who is joining us to the position of Special Education Coordinator at the secondary level, and we're so happy Joanna is here. She went through quite a process to get here, and Joanna is also a former graduate of the school district, so
Hometown
again,
girl makes good.
hometown girl makes good. There's a few of those. I'd also like to recognize one other person who's on the personnel agenda, and that's Elna Sanford. I believe she's on here someplace. I'm trying to find you. Oh, she's on the reorg, but
Yeah,
I'm just going to
yeah.
take a moment. Elna is going to fill some very tough shoes as the school district nurse coordinator, and I'd really like to thank you for stepping forward for that position. Big shoes to fill. I know it probably wasn't an easy decision, but we really appreciate that. So to Elna and Heather and Joanna, welcome. And the board will vote and we'll clap. And so we'd just like to thank you for joining us tonight.
Okay, I actually have a comment to make on the budget transfers. There's way too many. I know it's the end of the year, and the numbers are way too big. And if I was a community member, I'd be asking, how come they can transfer that large amount of money to things that should have been accounted for in the budget? I know I'm embarrassing Wayne, but this is like the third or fourth meeting in a row where we've moved stuff around. And we're talking about $700,000. So I think in the future, if we're going to do these things, it should be more open. For instance, the teacher buyouts, certainly we should have known how many teachers are going to retire, and that should have been included in the budget. So I don't know why there's a budget transfer for that. And I don't know why we had money in another place enough to transfer that. So if in the future we could have a little bit either not in the consent agenda and more of an explanation as to why we're transferring this amount of money and why it's a good thing and why there was money to transfer, I think we would serve the public better.
Yeah, maybe we want to set a threshold up before we.
I would suggest that you could, that's probably the type of item that probably should be under new business items rather than consent, so that you can have a conversation about it, and has to be moved separately, and,
Okay.
yeah, I agree.
I just want to say, I mean, it caught my eye too, and I was just wondering, I'm a statistics, I always look at trending and saying, okay, I mean, if this is 700, and is there an easy way to identify the dollar amount of fund transfers in any given year? Could we just, I'm just thinking, look at the last 2, 3, 4 years and just look at it from a trending standpoint. I mean, we have a huge budget, and the fact that we, this is, I mean, I don't know what that is. Maybe we transfer $1 million a year, $1.5 million. I don't know. In working, I appreciate what it takes to put together a budget of that size, and the fact that you have to move money around. Particularly, it happens at the end of the year because you're getting and you're trying. You get the last minute of doing things. I think it'd just be a good study just to look at a trending for the last 4 years, and just see, is it consistent in the amount, or are we increasing? And if it is, I think budgeting is an exercise. There's a skill to it. Some of it, I don't know, to say that we knew how many teachers were going to retire. I don't think, let's see, this budget was created in the spring of 2012. To think that we knew how many teachers were going to retire at the end of the school year of 2012-13, we would have never known that. So, but that would be satisfying to me. I'd just like to see if you could just put together, say, a 4-year trend. And
I did, I think that's a great idea. I did question the budget transfers when you were in with the training for the energy thing, and I did question them as they were going into the board packet, especially some of the larger scale ones that I'm probably not going to do justice. But I did ask, and I heard two things. One was that in moving over to our new system, we cleaned up a lot of people that were coded in the wrong
Right.
place. And in order to clean it up, you needed to move the
Money to
budget to
cover
the
it,
other
yeah.
codes. The other was that Linda said on the retirement one that there was a year lag because it wasn't in the place where it needed to be, so that it won't happen again next year. It's a catch-up, and it was like, it was an oops, it was a big oops, and, but I'm sitting there, and I sign these budget transfers, and I'm looking at, $300,000 coming across the desk for my signature for a transfer, and, Wayne wasn't available, and Linda came in, and I was satisfied that, I think it should be, I agree with everything that's been said so far, relocating it, maybe look at some trending, but I know two of the big ticket items were the cleanup and personnel codes and a mistake that was made in the retirement where it wasn't put in the place, and we're doing a year's worth of catch-up. Is that?
That's absolutely
Okay.
correct. I mean, you couldn't say better, any better.
Okay.
I appreciate the fact that, that you're noticing it, because it is important. And it is a phenomenon that does happen year's end. And I don't know in any of the many years that I've been in this business that I've seen it, any other way. It's just, statistically, it's going to happen in certain events. Fuel goes up, fuel goes down, capping tanks, not capping tanks. I mean, that would explain some of the ones in the facilities and operations. Like Greer explained with regards to the retirees, that was a mistake that was made 2 years ago. We're catching up on it. It wasn't anything that was a mistake that caused anything else, but money having to be moved around to fix it for next year, so you wouldn't see that one again.
It's good we had the money.
Well, it's where you move the money from that is a concern to me.
And those are contingencies.
That came
are
from
built.
health insurance. Does that mean we over budgeted health insurance
Yeah,
by
that's what some of the-
300?
That's for the
That's
contingency.
where, when we did the budget this year and we showed the contingencies that were removed,
Mhm.
yeah, that, like, the
Okay.
The concern is that when those contingencies are removed or have been removed, if we find another error where of $300,000, that needs to come from,
Right.
But I think cleaning up our budgeting process and is certainly helping to move us in the right direction. But
Just to,
Okay, so we're unlikely to see this kind of budget transferring at the end of next year.
I think we'll see some budget transfers, but I'll tell you, I don't want to see $300,000
Well, I don't either.
in,
All right.
the big ticket items were the ones that I very specifically question. It's like,
Okay.
oh my God, what's going on?
All right, any other discussion?
yeah, just, I recognize we want to be very transparent when we prepare the budget, and it's helpful to the board to understand too, but, so I guess I have a question whether it's legally required or it's the desire to be transparent, that we have a plethora of budget codes.
State defines.
That's a very good question, and we talked about changing the policy from time to time, because there should be a certain discretion for which the superintendent can make transfers, and then there's defined discretion for which the board should approve those over a specified amount, depending, sometimes there's a budget transfer that comes on my desk for a penny, or $1, and I'm like, what is this, but sometimes they have to happen to make an adjustment, for 10 other reasons. And, it's an unfortunate, necessary evil, but you can adjust the policy to, minimize or maximize the number of transfers the board wants to
Well,
see.
no, that's not what I asked. I asked about, like, for example, these codes, and I'm just looking at a $32,000 transfer to move money from bus driver code lines. Actually, they're all the same code lines, but they're going to different, transportation, must be non-instructional OT, transportation bus driver OT, transportation mechanic OT, transportation field trips. It's like, the money all goes to salaries of transportation employees. Like, and so, is there a legal requirement to have these oodles of code numbers and for these different topics, or legal requirement? And so we're just following a standard, or have we done this to ourselves by creating? some of the other budget transfers are clearly, you're moving it from one area and putting it in another. I don't see moving bus driver money to bus driver overtime money as being a real big transfer. It's going there, it drops into the same pocket. So it's kind of silly that, okay,
Yeah.
we got this $18,000 transfer to go from this bucket to this bucket, but no matter what bucket it comes out of, it goes into a bus driver's paycheck. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know whether we've done this to ourselves, or is this a legal requirement that we break it down the way we break it down, the budget?
I think that, things like overtime on the transfer that you're referring to, something that you'd want to track if you needed to, if it was being used too much.
Right.
There might be a time where you'd want to be able to track that, and by
That's
having
understandable.
separate codes. So I think we have kind of done it to ourselves by segregating it so much. It used to be overtime was built into a salary code.
Right.
So a salary code would have like 75 different items in it. But in order to get your handle on it and manage it effectively, sometimes you have to break it out so you can budget
Yeah.
appropriately for it.
I mean, I can tell you from my experience, because I deal with some of these same codes, and, Gary, you can chime in. I mean, I use them as a way of measuring my, success in process through the year. And I certainly would want to have two separate codes, one for regular and one for overtime, because it's that way you can look and say, okay, if all of a sudden my overtime starts to grow,
It's a way to see it.
I can be looking at it and saying, why, why is that? And it doesn't get lost in just a payroll account. So, we deal with it on a routine basis. Are there codes that we should get rid of? Are there codes that we should expand on? The downside of it is when you start changing codes a lot, if every year you start changing
Or
codes.
budget transfers.
Well,
Right.
again, I'm a trender,
Yeah.
You lose the ability to really trend and see how you've done year after year when you start making moves.
Yeah, I didn't want to detract from what Doug was saying, because I agree with him. But I think at this transportation one, for example, you go, okay, maybe you can say, well, why were we up on overtime? But you also realize, but we didn't spend as much on regular time either, so that's where the money came from. So it all effectively comes out in the wash, because it's certainly not that there's more dollars flowing into one bucket than the other. It has to be an even, a balance sheet, basically. What comes out goes in the other one. So, I guess, so Doug makes a very good point, but we also have to have some tolerance for that. This is going to happen when you've got this plethora of budget codes that some are going to be, you just can't get them equalized, especially when it comes to overtime as much as you'd like them to be. You may have more built in someplace else, and the overtime, for whatever reason, stuff comes up that you had a higher amount of overtime than necessary. The $4 million budget transfer was actually very well explained. It was actually done for transparency. All these things broken out, and it drops into one big bucket where the auditors say it should be. That makes sense. So,
Well, perhaps there should be a threshold. Anything over
Just make a quick comment.
200,000, right?
I think we really need to break them down, particularly in, say, operation, maintenance, transportation. I don't know about some of the other code. But you need to break them down because it's easier to find out things if they're broken down by design, by supply design, by outside contract, by building supplies, maintenance supplies, grounds, and all that. It's better to break it out, and you could see what you want to find a little easier that way. And I don't know if it's that much harder for Wayne to use that many more codes. It might be a plus for you too, that it's,
It's all tracking,
yeah.
It's all basis of tracking, and years ago, when I first came here, everything was bunched into one large code, and then it was very difficult to understand what was built into that code, because there was, multiple systems that were used, multiple business officials before me, and it wasn't tracked or kept track of. So in order to try to keep a very good eye on what spending's happening in different places, you want to segregate it so that you can understand, what's the trend from this year to the next, so you can give administrators that kind of history when they're doing their budgets for the following year. Hey, you didn't spend so much here, and I always give that kind of history to them so they understand where they're spending or not spending and where they're transferring from, or,
Yeah, we should definitely, in building the budget, look at end-of-year transfers.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's some repeat offenders, and it's like, well, just
Try
put
to
the
see
money
if
in
we
the right
clean
place
them
the
up.
first time.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah, but we do have to
Which we
recognize.
do, but
Right,
we
we do have to
probably do.
recognize budgeting is a forecast.
Yes.
So to Gary's point, you may have a bunch of, maybe you have a maintenance and repair, and I know I'm making this up, but a maintenance and repair item for each of the school buildings. Well, maybe a lot more went on at Haviland this year than
And you
went,
take
so you
it
gotta
from-
steal
yeah.
it from Roosevelt because you
Exactly.
That's
didn't use it at
exactly what we
Roosevelt.
do,
And that
yeah.
stuff's gonna go on and you have to accept it.
Right.
But to Doug's point, there's some other stuff where you go, wow, what did we do here? So
Right.
I'm sure we can tighten it up, but you have to understand it's gonna happen too.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor? All right,
Now we can clap.
so you said we're going to go, what did we agree to? We're going to do 15 first?
Yes.
And then?
Yep.
15.
All right. Let me get back up to the beginning here. And I have a motion for 15.1, approve arrange special education placement.
I thought we were
So
gonna-
moved.
I thought we were going to approve the consent agenda.
We just
We
did.
did.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
We didn't clap afterwards like you promised.
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't clap. I was waiting for the clap.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, congratulations.
Rookie,
sorry.
a rookie president.
You thought that we were just approving budget transfer?
That's the rookie.
Perhaps that was dominated a bit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe we should, that's why we gotta move them to a separate line item so that we can talk about them and not dilute the other stuff.
Yeah.
Good night,
Thank
Joanne.
you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Okay, we have a motion for arranging special education placement. Did we get that?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Just a quick discussion, presented in the packet, which we received, was 141 IEPs on 49 pages of documentation. I've spoken to this item several times. I know that with this, at the end of the year, there was some concerns and shuffling and things going on, but this seems to be an inordinate number at the end, and I would like to, I will discuss at the next special ed meeting, the specifics of why so many backed up to this point in time.
Okay.
But I do recommend the acceptance of all of these recommendations.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Carry. 15.2, approve the contract for special education services.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Approve the 15.3, approve the opening and authorize destruction.
So
Oh, that
moved.
sounds fierce. Of ballots.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, Debbie, could you you explain this a little bit?
Sure. Education law provides that if, within 6 months after holding a district vote, if there has not been a contested vote, which would happen right away, that the absentee ballots be destroyed. Otherwise, there are certain things that have to be maintained permanently, like the voter records, but these do not. And so to eliminate the possibility of having any names or anything else associated with absentees, they recommend destroying them. And this is something that we have not done in the past.
Okay.
It's something that has been recommended at recent district clerk trainings when we are discussing, what records to maintain and what ones shouldn't. And in the past, they've just all been filed and kept in storage. So I'm trying to clean up
So
records we don't need.
I didn't, but if I voted absentee ballot, you obviously keep the record that I voted, because that gets recorded in the book somewhere, voted absentee, but I did vote. But then the part where my actual ballot and my envelope is what's getting destroyed.
Right, the
So
ballot and the
You have a record that, just
envelope.
like if I had walked in and voted at the machine, I voted, but the other stuff's gone.
Yes,
Okay.
we permanently maintain a listing of the names of everyone who voted and a separate listing of all who voted by absentee.
What about if you said we have it going way back, what about all the votes before these dates? Is there stuff laying around we have to dig through and find and do the same?
There's boxes of the entire vote history with
Okay.
everything
So are we gonna
combined in
be-
those boxes
Are
in
we
the
gonna be
warehouse.
going through them
Okay.
and doing resolutions
Okay.
like this for
Yeah.
other dates in the past to get rid of this stuff?
Possibly at some point, but not
Okay.
immediately.
Okay.
All right. Are we going to full spindle or mutilate it? Isn't that what they used to say about the,
Fold, spindle, and
Fold,
mutilate.
fold, spindle, and
No,
mutilate.
they will
cards,
be
yeah.
shredded.
you have to be old.
And the
See, he
charge-
got
I
it.
never
He
heard
knew
that
exactly.
And the charge will be
Yeah.
burnt.
So this will appear on the organizational meeting
Okay.
every year,
So this just, we'll do the votes as we go,
right?
and then the old stuff, if somebody get, okay, gotcha, all right.
Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Approve recall of teachers. It's the 3 teachers that are listed here.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Yeah, the only thing I want to make a comment on too is,
No, you got to make a
talked-
comment when it's a discussion.
yeah, no, I'm sorry, but you called for the vote and I didn't speak up fast enough. I have to get back into the groove here. We probably ought to just make sure we keep track of where these folks are because, obviously they were appointed once before. And we want to keep track for tenure purposes, that we have good documentation, that since we don't have a specific position and appointment like you do with a normal personnel appointment where we kind of list everything out and when's the tenure due date and all that. We want to make sure that we don't lose track of that. So, I'm sure personnel office follows up on that. In case there's anybody, those are already tenured, it's not as important, but those that aren't, we want to make sure we don't lose track of.
All right, 15.5, approve recall of teaching assistant as listed in the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Same comment there.
Any comment? Same comment?
Same
All right.
comment, just
All those
to
in
tenure
favor?
track.
15.6, approve creation of position, which is the 1.0 FTE E Dean of Students position at the high school
So-
as a 10-month position.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, let's, we should probably, I think it probably did some discussion actually occurred in the last part of the last school year, but just since it's, we're creating the position, we probably ought to talk about it a little bit and also, because we eliminated an assistant principal's position, so obviously people are going to say, wait a minute, what's this all about? And I think what's being proposed makes sense, but I think it needs to be explained to the public so that it does make sense, from salary level, et cetera, why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, a couple of things. We certainly are always monitoring administrative costs. It's typically what the public points the finger at first to reduce. And we do have declining enrollment. So in preparing this year's budget, we did eliminate the assistant principal position for financial reasons and due to declining enrollment. And in part, the discipline at the high school has improved, based on all of our data. With that said, we started to have some growing concerns and quite a bit of reservation about the health and safety of the high school in light of the fact that where we landed in our administrative structure was moving Eric Shaw to the middle school. Chris Fiorentino also moved to the middle school. And so that leaves FDR with, Barbara Marine as principal, Mark Plesha, who's been a longstanding AP, but the other 2 APs, who were really the backbone of the structure there, were moving. We also created a new security structure that was approved at the high school, but it's in its first year. So we were going to have 1 less AP, 1 new AP, a new security structure that's going to need some oversight and some management. So that was all really kind of piecing it together. Additionally, this was our first year through. While we were putting together the budget season, which happens really early on, we put together a budget. It's okay, we'll be down an administrator. And then we hit APPR heaven. not. And we realized that the administrative time to conduct all of the APPRs in the manner that they need to be conducted was overwhelming. So we really started to say, wow, how are we going to keep the high school safe, manage this whole new unfunded mandate with APPR, and manage a new security personnel configuration? And we really started to become concerned. We then fortunately started to put together student schedules, and again, we're recurring theme tonight is declining enrollment, and realized as we were scheduling students, we needed, and this was on a previous agenda, Kevin, we had one extra, I don't want to say extra, we had one science teacher too many. So of course, the minute you find a body, somebody wants a body. And when I looked at the overall health of our organization and say, okay, we have this newfound personnel funding, probably coded incorrectly at this point, but we had some funding available because we had this science teacher overage that we needed. And I said, okay, well, this money for this science teacher was already in the budget. And where do we have a great need to see us through? And knowing that we didn't want to add a full administrative position, and that part of what our administrators at the high school were doing were supervising the cafeteria and hallways, we did some brainstorming and realized that a dean of students is a position that's recognized in the administrative contract, but you can bring it in at a lower salary if you keep out the evaluation piece. So when all was said and done, at the end of the day, we realized that by creating a dean of students position, we would address some of the growing concerns that, from the point of recommending the elimination of an assistant principal based on declining enrollment, to the reality of what does APPR look like and how many hours it takes the administrators to do, we felt strongly that the recommendation to utilize that personnel funding was to propose the dean of students. But it's a very valid question. You eliminate an administrator and now you're adding them back on. How are you financing it? What's the rationale?
Greer, as an expansion of this conversation, I would hope that we are going to update the job descriptions of the APs, in a sense, by updating in some way, shape, or form to give true value to the amount of time they're spending for the APPR, converting that to dollars and adding it to the deficit that occurred between the APPR program and the race to the top and the monies that the federal government provided us with to the cost of the districts?
Yeah, the unfunded mandates. Yeah,
I mean, that deficit is growing faster than the federal government's deficit, I think, in truth. The amount of money that we got from the race to the top that was so pushed down our throats to the cost to the district to implement those things. The end result is, I believe, in the end, we're going to have a much better control of the teaching that goes on in the district, but it's a very costly program that we're really going to be dealing with over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I would say that the amount of time that the administrators spend in evaluation has minimally doubled.
Yeah, and so, and at the other side, I would suggest that I'm going to request that probably the next board meeting, or one, that two of the items that be reviewed mid-year, not end year, but mid-year, because of the impact of the budgets, are this dean of students cost, and see how the justification is true or not true at that point. And the second one was something I haven't seen, and people know that I am not one of the strong supporters of the security system change, I would like to review, starting with, we're solving a problem, but I've never seen a clear definition of what the problem was we're solving, and I certainly cannot examine a review of the success of that program unless I know what the problem is we're solving. So I think that is a program that I would like to put under a little higher scrutiny. And one of the specific reasons are we took valued employees and cost them their jobs to substitute a program of bringing in outside vendors to do something. And I really want to be sure that the value justified the elimination of positions for valued employees.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Now we're going to go back to 13 and the discussion on board meeting placement. So as I recall, at either the last meeting or the meeting before, we spoke of the possibility of having a permanent boardroom with whiteboards or at least visual displays so that we could do have the function of board docs be visible both to the community and to the people here and follow along and actually see the documents as they as we discuss them. In order to have that, it's easier to have a room permanently set up since it's difficult to move the stuff. Now, that said, and I think that that's a great idea, however, I do enjoy going to the different buildings. So I believe at the end of our last discussion, we talked about perhaps having those meetings with the individual buildings as the last meetings of the school year. Is that correct? All right, so let's start from there and see what everybody has to say.
So one of the first questions I have is whether it's possible to find a space in the district where we can set up for school board meetings and leave it set up. I like the idea of consistently going to the same place, but the real driver in my mind is that it wouldn't be the same work over and over and over by the staff to set up for the board meeting for every independent meeting. Currently that's more or less the situation we have where we set up for a meeting in the administrative office and then we relocate and then we relocate back. And so one advantage that I see in leaving it in one place is that you leave the equipment set up and you don't have to touch it again. Therefore, it's a cost savings in terms of labor. Is that something that would be part of this plan? Or is it the case that we would have to set up, but it's still a cost saving simply because, my assumption is that it would be at Hyde Park Elementary, which is just a more convenient location to set up and locate the meeting. So in my mind, there's three possibilities. Either there is no cost savings. There's a cost savings because of the location. Okay, just two possibilities, I guess.
I'll start with the most cost-effective, and is to have it here and to keep it here. That by far is the most cost-effective because we don't have the custodial staff over at Hyde Park Elementary. And to do that, to set up a board meeting, would be relocating someone. The other thing is that this room is utilized multi-use very efficiently and works really well for, we were here all day for the last 2 days. We had our assessment summit. And but it very easily goes from one configuration to another, and we have the custodial staff and the technology staff right here in-house. So this is the most cost-effective place to have our meetings. And I know at one point it was talked about having a screen installed where we could show the agenda and then, flip to the presentations. So that's that answer about cost effective. It,
Well, I know at least one school has a dedicated room, Beacon, but they built the school with that in mind. They put that in there. They also have a real board thing with a theater-like setting with multiple cameras that, they just click back and forth, and they got 2 techs, and it's very high stuff. Well, there's a couple things. For instance, I think this U-shape is much more conducive to discussion than out like this, anyway.
Yeah,
So-
I've said I'm not a fan of the dais thing.
Because if we're all on the line and I have to go like this to here
Right.
because I'm hard of hearing and I have to look at your lips, then that's not a good thing.
I've always
But,
said it's a meeting of the board in the public eye, not with the public. So, it's not necessarily we be on display.
Right.
It's more important that we're able to interact, and
Correct.
folks can observe the proceedings however they see us, whether even if they're looking at our back, they can see
The
us.
question is, maybe the tech committee could discuss ways to see what technology you could put in this room that doesn't have to be moved. It's the-
Right.
the technology that,
yeah.
that is the thing that moves, which is hard.
Right, and right now in this room, we don't move the technology, that stays here.
Well, you move the table arrangements, the mics,
Right, but it all stays here,
room.
in this room.
Okay.
I want to be really cautious that the technology isn't in AV department, and, I see Therese here, and I just have real concerns that we have a community volunteer who opted to film our board meetings for free, and we are already over extending our employees because it is not part of what Therese is supposed to be doing to film a board meeting. It's a really good staff, and they really want to take care of us, but I really want to be careful that we do not have an AV and that we keep anything that has an on button goes to technology. And, well, that'll be part of the whole technology looking at that, because the more we have our tech people take care of adults, the less they do for children. So I just have to make that little commentary.
Right, but you could have permanent cameras installed. that-
Right.
On the wall with the wires
And-
and everything in the ceilings. You could minimize the amount of interaction with tech people once it's set up properly.
Right, but I don't know that we need the tech committee. We would just need a financial committee to say, are we going to make this our permanent presentation room? And then we'll do the necessary legwork to get some estimates. But right now, this is our boardroom. And when the building was purchased, this was designed and dedicated to be the boardroom. It was redecorated, I think, with a few pieces, like you're saying, to have maybe permanently install a camera, permanently install something here. I think that's worth exploring. I think the second part of the question is, do we want to then go to, see if we go to Hyde Park Elementary and then we still want to visit the buildings, now we have a sixth location, the seventh location that we never need to be at. But if we wanted to visit the other 6 schools, do you want to spend the last 6 months of the school year going to one of the buildings? I really feel that if we want to make this more high-tech, we should, budget for it and plan for making this room more high-tech.
Yeah, you can, I agree to some extent. This, get all the money in the world, will crank up the technology in this room, but unfortunately, and, you know, I was on the board when we picked this building, and, you know, well, that'll make a great boardroom, and the more I sit in it, it's a terrible boardroom. I mean, it's the nicest room we've got in this building that's of size,
Yeah.
but like the layout, with the way the doors are, and it's not big enough, and here I am tonight, turning around twice to look at the screen. The presentation's for my benefit as a board member, and I've got to turn myself around so I can see the screen. But I sit here, and I've been thinking about it, I'm like, well, where else do you put it, you know? Because of the way this room's laid out. It's just a terrible setup, and it's the fault of the room. It's not the fault of people, or, you know, the only thing that would make it really cool from a technology point of view, but probably stupid money expensive, is to have a screen on both sides of the room where, okay, those guys can see it, you in the middle can decide which way you're going to look, and the audience can see it, and I can look straight ahead. But now you're blocking a door. So, I mean, I don't know what this is just a tough room to be in. But it's the best we've got. So I think, but we have to, if we do something, let's not rush into it, because we've got to give some thought to the physical layout of this room. You know, I also, this room is a little bit bigger. Don't want to lose your lunchroom, but in retrospect, I would have loved to, I wish we had taken this wall down when we moved in here and did something else with the lunchroom, but, you know, then again, the building was a little fuller because the special ed group was in the back as opposed to where they are now, you know. I wish the room were a little bit wider, because then you could probably do some pretty neat stuff, you know,
Well, we
for
have enough
layout.
space here now, we could.
Well, and maybe that's it. Do we look at doing something in the back of the building? I don't know. You know, it's just a thought. But the room, the physical layout of the room's got to be right first before you. I wouldn't want to throw a lot of money at it and still have it really not be ideal. That's the only thing that would concern me. I'm not opposed to the technology and the money to make it good. But if you know, it's the proverbial, well, you know,
Yeah.
so spend a lot of money on something and it's still lousy.
There'll still be special exceptions, then we need to go to have one, because there's
Right.
not enough room here.
Well, and that's the other thing, we always had said that, like, you know, sometimes you put something on the agenda and you just know it's gonna attract a crowd, you know, without even hearing, you just kind of know, ooh, that's probably gonna be a topic of interest and they're all gonna come out for this one. You know, that's when you really ought to just schedule the meeting at Haviland or Roosevelt, but someplace large and able to accommodate the crowd, and just know from the get-go that's what you're gonna do. So.
And the most consistent time we're getting that right now is when we go to the schools. Several of the schools have shared the presentation with their students, which lead to their parents and their grandparents coming. And many of those, that's the only board meeting they ever attend.
Right.
But it would, without doubt, overflow the capabilities of this room.
We also shouldn't neglect, I mean, I know, because obviously you all are here, and I'm sure you watch it on Channel 22 after you've been at the meeting. Maybe not, you've lived through it, why do I gotta watch it on TV? But, you know, I've even made comments, Steve Hughes, you know, we talked about the camera, and, you know, it is really wonderful. There are so many people that are actually watching this, you know, that you'd be surprised. If you've been on the board a long time, you know, you may not realize it because they're obviously not watching it at home, and why go watch it, repeat it after you've sat through it. But when you talk to people, you know, I can't believe the people I've talked to that know what's going on.
Yeah.
Because it's shown multiple times throughout the week. So you don't have to plop down on Thursday night at a specific time or even leave your house to come here. They're watching on TV. They're flipping through channels on Saturday morning and run across it and say, that looks interesting, and they settle in and they watch it. So they are aware of what's going on. So that really has to continue. We need to make it simple for people, but it is provided a lot of accessibility.
Absolutely.
And nobody can ever say that, you know, we're doing this stuff behind closed doors and hiding. I mean, we're more transparent than ever because you can watch it in your living room now. So.
I
All
guess
right,
the-
so where do we go from here?
Okay.
I would say, if you feel that the administration F&O director can come up with feasibility study of either for this room or for a room in the back or elementary, whatever they come up to, and then bring it back to us. And I agree with Kevin, we shouldn't rush into this. This is fine for right now. Plus, we need a budget money to do any kind of work, but permanent site is an excellent idea. But we can talk all night and not
Yeah. No, we're not gonna
know
resolve anything.
enough of
Yeah.
the technical details as to where and why and how.
Yeah, so I have a couple questions.
Right.
I mean, we could certainly do the feasibility study for a permanent site, and even if that means, I mean, we now have space here to blow through this wall into the lunchroom, because we could push the lunchroom someplace else, but, and is the lunchroom really right behind us?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it just seems like it's
Well,
such a long
There's a
walk down the hallway
No,
to
there's a
get there.
hallway, and then there's the room.
Yeah, there's
Not the whole
something
wall,
that's
but, yeah.
bizarre.
This building is crazy.
I mean, I guess there's two questions. One is there interest in moving this to Hyde Park Elementary, knowing that we could leave it there, it would be set up a lot of times, but we'd still have to reconfigure because we do use that space for professional development. But it does mean moving the technology and the F&O people off-site to do the board meeting. So, for example, we're here, and the this custodial staff that's on duty is off doing other things in the building that need to be done because we have people here. And
Yeah.
do we want to explore going to Hyde Park Elementary, knowing that that would be an increase to our F&O workload?
My answer is no. I don't see going to Hyde Park Elementary. I really, I'm much more interested in seeing Hyde Park Elementary being used by for some other purpose, hopefully revenue producing. I don't think, to me, it's a bad example to go to Hyde Park Elementary, because I think it's like just water filling a space that's empty.
For an excuse to use something.
Yeah, I mean, this room may not be ideal, but I think it provides a space for us to conduct our business. I don't think that the setup, I mean, looking at what we have here, I don't think that the setup is that, it's that big of a project to set it up each time. I think this room, it could be better, and maybe we should be looking at other options. But when you start looking at that, recognize that any renovation we do is just dollars that aren't
Right.
going toward the benefit of the students. So I think we need to take a real hard look at it. As far as I'm concerned, we should just continue to meet here. I would be interested, more importantly, I think, is how do the buildings and the building principals and the teachers and the faculty and the students, how do they feel about us coming to them, at some interval? And if they find that as a benefit, whether it because it gets students involved, teachers involved, parents involved, if they recognize that as a benefit, then I think we should go to them at some routine, once, twice a year type of thing. And then I think you're right. I think we've got to look at Haviland when we have, if it's budget or whenever when we anticipate larger crowds, then that's where we have to go. But, I guess I'm thinking that there's a whole lot of discussion going on about something that I'm not sure I see it as the problem, that I think we just should continue with what we've got here. We can look at improvements. Maybe it's a flat screen TV that could, Debbie needs one more thing to do. That where it could be a scrolling, the agenda could be scrolling in some way. Yeah.
You want an
That's-
87-inch Samsung TV, is that what you want up there?
Just.
I agree with Perry. I'm not interested in moving equipment and personnel back and forth between here and Hyde Park Elementary. If this is the most efficient place to locate the meetings, then I prefer this location. If there is a strong desire on the part of the building administrators and the parents, then I like the idea of locating in time those meetings, scheduling those meetings for the end of the year, back to back, rather than every other month, every other meeting is in a different school building. That way, once the equipment is starting to move, it's just
just moves.
to move.
Yeah.
So once again, Mr. Lebrand had a good idea even now that he's left the board.
So that could look like having it condensed, so we have 2 board meetings a month. So instead of having, we typically did a presentation at a school building once a month, we could actually say, we'll back end it for second half of the year, and we would know at the end of the meeting, okay, pack up the board equipment, because in 2 weeks, we'll start at Ralph R. In 2 weeks, we're going to be at Netherwood. In 2 weeks, we're going to be at Violet Avenue. We could very easily do that, and I'll tell you, the building principals and even the secretaries, even if they don't come, everybody knows you're coming. And everybody works to spiff up the school and hang up the artwork, and because of work schedules, there are some board members that, get out and about, and for other board members, maybe the only time they're going to be in that school is that night. And I know the principals just love to have you in their building, and some of them bake for, I mean, you know what it's like when we
Had
get
some
there.
good meals
so,
in the past,
yeah.
actually.
I would be in favor, I'd be in favor, because I think there is a good element in the fact that it forces us into those buildings. It gives us the opportunity
Right.
to get into buildings.
That's what I said the
But-
last time, yeah.
But, let's take it one step further. Would they like to give we start our executive session typically at 5:30, if we show up early, could we, get a little, 15-minute or 20-minute dog and pony show, a quick tour of the building, something, a classroom that we should see, let's,
Yeah, we used to do that, and I think we should get back to that.
yeah, I think that would be a great thing. Let us see what the kids are doing.
Right.
Let's see what the staff is doing.
And I think moving it to the back end sort of levels the playing field, because it's, it always, not concerned me, but I always waited to see what could a principal be presenting on Pride in my school this year in October. I just got to know some of the kids by name and stuff like that, and you want me to talk about how well we are doing, how we moved along. There just hasn't been time to do that. And then it never gets even, because the next year we rotated them and shifted the schedule, so, it was almost like, a lottery at the beginning of the year. Let's all pull out a number and see when I go am I going to have a good slot or a bad slot, it's,
As far as the technology, the thought that we were going to, group it together so we go from one building 1 week and 2 weeks later another building. I'm not sure that's as much of an issue from a technology standpoint, because I would expect that all this stuff gets packed into containers, totes.
Yeah.
And I would think they're probably brought back here, aren't they?
Exactly.
Within 24 hours, they're back
Yep.
here. So whether they're used in this building 2 weeks later or used in another building 2 weeks later, I think it's pretty irrelevant.
Right.
Unless it makes sense for some other reason. I would create the schedule based on something other than technology, because I think the technology is going to be the same either way, same effort either way.
Not quite. It depends on what kind of technology you're talking about.
Well, the technology that's going to move.
Certainly
us.
if we have permanent cameras,
Okay, we're not
that-
there.
but if we did have a real boardroom with permanent camera, with like a little station over there, or say we had 3 cameras, 3 monitors, and 3 switches, so that instead of carefully moving the camera so it doesn't give you, dizzy spells, you could just switch cameras. But that being said, if that's the only camera, then yeah, there's no difference.
Well, I think what I'd like to see is for us to try it this year, find out what it looks like, find out how it affects the district, the administrators, the community, and if it looks like it's going to stick, then we start thinking about perhaps installing some technology in this room, something that will improve our ability to record or maybe even stream the meetings.
Well,
But-
I think we can do that in parallel. We can do that, but I think we still need to do a survey of some kind as to what is possible to do in this building, and what we can do in-house, how much it would cost, that kind
Do
of
we
stuff.
put the fireplace back in?
We'll get the fireplace, that's fine.
Oh,
yeah.
for that, sorry, for the fireside chats?
Yeah, the fireplace.
You know what, also, I just thought of, sitting here thinking the technology, that actually I just solved the problem. I don't have to turn around if I'm sitting in this seat. Why can't we
Okay.
set this thing like go to meeting, have that computer, the presentation computer for presentations take over, with that go to meeting.com or whatever, like that Citrix thing, so that I can sit here and just watch the slides as they go by. I don't have to turn myself around. I can sit there and watch the
I do that
slides,
now.
glance at them,
You can do that
That's
now.
pretty simple, isn't it?
Kevin, did you notice that the PC behind you is off?
No.
I turned that off remotely when we were done with it.
See what I mean?
So the technology is already installed, you
Right.
just need to be,
Right. Just activate it. I'll let
Just
you have
need to be
permission
learned how to use it.
activate my iPad.
So
I don't have to turn around. I can just sit
what
here and
I'm
look at the
hearing is
slides.
I'll put together a
That
back-end loaded
evening when your
visit.
iPad turns on itself and starts searching around.
You go to talk.
Oh, that's okay. I'll put together the back-end schedule of building visits at the end of the year. We'll stay away from June then, if that's all right. I
Yeah.
don't want
Yeah,
to make
good
them
idea.
crazy. But, we have 6 buildings, so we'll take the 3 months and put them in, and all the building principals will have plenty of warning, and, at least that way our facilities people will know that, once they box it up, they'll know where it's going next, even if they want to bring it here for safety and security. Okay. I think that's a good plan, and we can explore the technology, and I think, again, I'll just reiterate, we need to look at staffing, because,
Okay, so we'll move on to, I have a motion to enter public participation.
So moved?
second.
Any discussion? You have a discussion?
No, I'm sorry. I was
All
getting
in
ready to
favor?
raise my hand.
At this late in the night, we got to
You
get
can't
moving
tell.
early.
Would anybody like to address the board? Good man.
I know, Doug, you were waiting for me to get up here last time.
Uh-huh.
My name's Bobby Goodman, 9 East Market Street. Just wanted to welcome our new board members,
Thank you.
and congratulations, Doug, I was late, sorry. Congratulations on your presidency. Thank you to Perry for coming to the Facility Steering Forum meetings. I think it makes a big difference when you're there. And I hope that, that the tough discussions that are going to come ahead that are based on Facility Steering Forums, that the board members that are the liaisons for facilities will come to those meetings so they can take part of that discussion. Also, looking forward to the next steps that were referred to during the survey results of the community engagement and the discussions and the outreach for parent involvement. I'm great that that's going to come into light, and hopefully we can get those BLTs and stuff back together.
Yep.
Yep.
Excited.
And I think it's important. I like, I missed the discussion before about moving the meetings, and the presence at the school buildings is important, I think, from the Board of Ed for the parents. It's hard, as you see, to get anybody to come, but it is when you're at your home school, I think we can get a little bit more parent involvement, especially if the kids are putting on the pride or displaying their artwork or cutting the ribbon at the bridge, you get a little bit more there. And being that the building principals don't have to come here, for their contracts anymore, I think it's great that you go there. They have to put on their dog and pony show. They have to walk you through their buildings. I know we used to do the tours before the meetings, and being that these discussions are going to come up about facilities, I think it's important that you are in those buildings and you do get walked around and you do see what's going on in each building. And that's it. Thanks.
Would anybody else like to address the board? I have a motion to close public
So
participation.
moved?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, information, upcoming,
Well, we'll respond real quick. Thanks,
Oh, yeah, I'm
Bobby.
sorry.
No, that's
I'm
right.
sorry.
No, that's right.
rookie,
No, thanks, because that's kind of what we were looking for, a little affirmation of some of that discussion, and thanks for, bringing that up, and, I know it's only one opinion, but it was an opinion, and it does matter, so thanks, because, I think probably most of what you said is exactly on point, so it's good, as far as visiting the buildings and whatnot, I think we probably talked ourselves into it, and that just confirmed it, thanks.
and I'd like to say that for the first time, this was not used. Special circumstances, it will be used, but tonight, It was a nice night. Okay. Any other comments?
Well, just our next, are we on?
Information? Yeah.
Yeah.
The next board meeting is August 29th. Wait, is that it?
Not August 8th?
Why does that say August 8th?
I don't know.
I just noticed that. Okay, so we are looking at the 29th, right?
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, good.
All right.
I do need to say that if we need an emergency meeting, I will call people together. The only one I anticipate is if we really feel that we're going to lose a candidate by not appointing them, I may try to get a quorum of the board together. I'll try to avoid that, but if
Okay.
necessary, I may need one 10-minute meeting, and, and as is always the case, if there any emergency arises, we'll pull together with as much notice as we can a meeting if we need to.
It is exceedingly rare that we've ever said no to a candidate. So even if you poll us, and you can pretty much assure somebody that, when you make an offer that, yeah, they're meeting on the 29th, don't worry about it.
Yeah, you can't
know,
poll.
Right, but if they're not comfortable until they know, you can always ask and say, does anybody have any objection? And, and you say, no, it's gonna go on and it'll sail right through on the agenda, that's okay too. I mean, obviously, they're not good until we voted for them, but I mean, at least you'd know that nothing was gonna come up that night and shock them, and now they turned down 3 other jobs, so,
Okay.
I mean, I'm never opposed to a poll either,
That's different.
so, if it's too hard to get a meeting together.
Okay. I don't believe we need a second exec session. So at this time, I have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?